Councillors, please be seated. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Predetermination Committee. I have apology of absence from Bailey Ahern. Do we have any other apologies?
Morning, Provost, morning, members. No, we have no further apologies. In terms of those members who are joining virtually online, they can just confirm that they are present. Councillor James. Councillor James. Do we have Councillor Gogali?
Yes.
And Councillor Freshwater?
Yes, present.
I'll see if colleagues can work with Councillor James if there's any technical issues. Are there any other members who are joining online?
I'm joining online.
Oh,
Councillor
apologies, Councillor Robertson, I mischecked there. All other members are present in the chambers, Provost.
Scott, excuse me, I couldn't get in. I am now in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you. Next, item 2 is declarations of interest. I have Councillor Frank Smith with a declaration of interest.
Yeah, I'd like to declare a non-financial interest, please, as being professional for 12.5 years at the club.
Okay, thank you. Item A1 is a request for deputations. Are members happy to agree deputations in relation to item 3 on the agenda? Thank you. Members, item 3 is reconfiguration of the existing golf course and clubhouse from 18 holes to 9 holes and a community hub building and associated sports courts and bike trails, walking and cycling paths and car parking area, erection of up to 175 residential dwellings, open amenity space, landscaping, drainage, upgraded site access and associated works at Craigiehill Golf Club. Are we now able to move to Mr. Christian Smith, the Development Manager and Building Services Manager, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Provost. Good morning, councillors and others in attendance, whether in the chambers or online. I'll now take you through a presentation setting out the context of the application and also some slides to set the scene. The application itself relates to the principle of developing up to 175 houses, reducing the size of Craigiehill Golf Course to 9 holes, building a new clubhouse which could also be used for community-related purposes, and providing various outdoor leisure facilities, all within the protected Perth Greenbelt and on land which rises steeply to a significant height and has visibility from a wide range of locations. The housing aspects of these proposals have not been considered to be justified and are clearly significantly contrary to the Council's policies and overall spatial strategy, or the way in which Perth has been strategically planned to be developed. All is set out in the Local Development Plan and also the policies of National Planning Framework 4. The report before you goes into significant detail, and I only intend to briefly summarise the primary issues. Firstly, development in the Greenbelt is tightly restricted and should only be considered acceptable in exceptional circumstances and where the weight of planning merits outweigh all other considerations. In this case, the justification presented in the application seems to focus on the financial circumstances of the golf club, but takes limited consideration of other important relevant issues and impacts. Conversely, as set out in paragraphs 11.8.3 and 11.8.4, the likely overall impacts of the proposals see economic and environmental risks. Importantly, none of the relevant recognised criteria of considering such proposals are shown to have been met, and as I say, there are also a number of adverse impacts. For example, both the primary and secondary accesses would lead to or from roads and streets which are known to flood, and as such safe access could not be achieved by emergency services or others. Also, the introduction of a significant amount of unplanned housing would likely impact the planned way in which it is intended to see housing delivered in Perth and Kinross, a significant amount of which has and is to be developed in nearby areas such as Perth West. Approval of this application would also likely be seen as setting a significant and undesirable precedent and acceptance of the principle for other inappropriate developments in the Greenbelt with far-reaching consequences. There's also some confusion in the submissions in relation to what areas would be developed and how this would impact on ancient woodland and other important trees. One document saying these areas would be not affected and another showing that they would. However, paragraph 11.1.11 of the report makes it clear that even if some outstanding matters of detail could be addressed, that the overall principle of developing housing here at a significant scale would still not be considered as being acceptable. This includes issues raised in the last days by the applicant in relation to aspects of detail within the transport assessment and how biodiversity and woodland issues have been assessed and debated during the processing of the application. However, it is important to clarify that the nearby site proposed for an Aldi store, which is allocated in LDP2 for employment purposes, has always been advised to be included within the transport assessment. It seems that the applicant has chosen to admit that site as the Aldi planning permission had not been confirmed at the time of the preparation of the transport assessment, although it has now been confirmed and permission granted. In essence, a value for that site should always have been included nevertheless, as was advised. In addition, on biodiversity and ancient woodland matters, clear advice has been provided as to what the concerns were, but the conflicting information on tree impacts remains. The EIA contradicts the indicative layout. However, these are matters of detail, as I say, and would not in any case change the recommendation that the proposals are not acceptable in principle. I've also not found any evidence that any meeting requests from the applicant or agents to my teams have been denied. Finally, and is often the case, some matters only draw to a close in the lead up to the time in which the reports are finalised and a decision can be taken, and as such are not always covered full in the report drafting. However, in this case, issues raised on behalf of the applicant in recent days are not seen to have any significant impact on the recommendation before you, and many of those matters relate to what-ifs and speculation and are not relevant in the decision-making process in any case. I'll now take you to a series of slides to give some visual scene setting. The first slide, which I think is slide 4, is an aerial image, and this shows the location of the site in red with areas of Perth identifiable around it, the M90 to the south, Glasgow Road a short distance to the north, and the Aviva campus immediately to the west. The second slide shows the submitted indicative layout, within which we see the housing element winding up the steep northern slope, whilst the reduced and reconfigured golf course would be on the upper southern part. Such ponds are shown primarily along the northeast or upper right area, below the green arrow, and where much of the ancient woodland is located. The arrow itself shows where the secondary or emergency access has been indicated, this leading to streets which are then known to be subject to flooding. The primary access itself is in the northwest or upper right corner, leading to Low Road, which is also known to be an area which floods. Third slide. This shows the areas of woodland, the area of ancient woodland identifiable in the northwest corner, the triangular blue part. It also indicates the low point in the north with a blue dot and the high point of the site in the south as a red dot. In the next few slides, we see the known flood risk situation encircling the site and affecting the access points. The next slide. This sets out the overall picture in relation to flood risk from both rain and water courses. The next slide. Here we zoom in a little and shows the situation associated with secondary access onto Woodside Crescent and then in turn onto Murray Crescent, both of which have known flood risks. We then move to a slide showing the main access on Low Road, and this travels across the Scouring Burn, and there is wider flood risk areas on Glasgow Road, Necessity Braes and other areas along the local water courses and areas subject to surface water flooding as well. Next. Here we have a series of slides showing the situation in Local Development Plan 2. This first slide is clearly indicating that the site in the centre of shot is out with the Perth settlement boundary. Also obvious are the numerous sites within the city limits where areas have been planned to support and deliver the needs of Perth's growth and economic prosperity. We then move to a slide identifying the area to the west of Perth and in the northwest to the northwest of the site, where the large strategic land releases have been planned and tested through the examination of the local development plan, this seeing the large swathe of purple areas comprising areas such as Perth West, Almond Valley, and the brown area above, which is Bertha Park. There are concerns that a significant unplanned release, as is proposed today, could impact the viability and deliverability of these identified sites. Final batch of slides show various photographs identified by the following numbers and direction arrows. The first two photos in the next slide look east and west on Low Road. Then a slide that looks up Low Road towards the existing golf course across the roads and areas that frequently flood, that particularly on the right. Here we now see the core from the core path at a midpoint along the eastern boundary looking across the golf course and in turn over Perth. Then the next slide, we again look across the golf course and one of the areas proposed for housing, the position central in the site. The next slide is from a position slightly further west looking northeast. Then the next slide is towards the western boundary and looking north down to the existing clubhouse and Glasgow Road and beyond. The next slide shows further areas to be developed with housing. Then the next slide, areas to be retained for golf purposes. And next we see the areas of ancient woodland from the core path. The next and final slide shows areas of standing water near Woodside Crescent and also drainage features indicating the surface water and watercourse related issues associated to the site surroundings. Thank you. That ends the presentation. Back to you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. There will be questions to officers at the end after we have had the deputations and questions to the deputies. If I can first invite the objectors, Janice Haig and Malcolm McConaughey, on behalf of Perth Community Flood Aid, to make their deputation. You have a maximum of 10 minutes and the Deputy Provost will manage your deputation.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Janice Haig. I'm the founder and chairperson of Perth Community Flood Aid, a voluntary group that raises awareness of the increasing need of property and community flood resilience in Perth and beyond. As requested by the Provost due to time limitations, we will be presenting a 10-minute joint deputation of objectors. Local residents and objectors kindly agreed to share their concerns with us, and they are incorporated into this report. And I'll begin with points raised only by them. The Planning Officer's report highlights the incomplete traffic assessment relating to Aldi's, but the hub, if it's well used, as they suggest it will be, then that will affect the traffic in Low Road and Necessity Brae. So this assessment is a point of principle and cannot be left until the detailed planning stage. There are plans to narrow part of Low Road to 7.3 metres to lay a 2-metre footpath up the south side of Low Road from the golf course to Necessity Brae. They argue that this needs to be checked for competency as it's out with the published red line boundary of the planning application. It also hasn't been the subject of any neighbourhood notification contrary to planning regulations to their knowledge. They also query if a proposed footpath to the east of the access road, and the emergency access road, which also stray out of the boundary, are permitted, due to them being unknown if the notification or declaration of landowners for these elements have been completed. We all wish to endorse the Planning Officer's recommendations to refuse this application on all points made, but missing information means that full public scrutiny cannot be achieved. Perth Community Flood Aid and other objectors could have spoken about many elements, including the significant non-compliance with NPF4 and LDP's Greenbelt policies, NPF4's Policy 16 on homes, quality homes, Policy 6 of the LDP on settlement boundaries, but PCFA will concentrate on noise impact, access and flooding. A noise impact assessment should have been sought as per Criterion E of NPF4 Policy 23, Health and Safety, and LDP Policy 56, Noise Pollution, as the agent of change principle applies to noise-sensitive development. Aviva's turbine would only be 300 metres from the planned houses, not open greenbelt land as it is at present, and residents would hear it at its loudest most of the time due to the prevalent wind direction. Shadow flicker and noise nuisance have already been noted further afield, so the extent of developable area and relationship with the turbine must be considered before any further progression. Additional anxiety around noise includes blasting the bedrock to form platforms for houses and for roads to be built, along with the impact of blasting on flooding, ground stability, especially relating to the turbine and nearby houses, and wildlife, including the local deer. Nearby common good land is under threat as it's required by the applicants to construct essential infrastructure, but the overriding concern, shared by most residents and objectors, is flooding. Flooding fears were alleviated for some by mention of an independent report, but the only independent work carried out was a limited, independent initial review of preliminary flooding and drainage findings, not a full-scale report. Malcolm will now cover more details on flooding.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Malcolm McConaughey. I was a senior hydrologist with the Tay River Purification Board and NCPA up until 2020 when I retired after a 42-year career where I dealt with flooding, helped develop and operate flood warning schemes and provided flood risk advice to 16 planning authorities, developers, the Scottish Government and the public. I am now retired and a committee member of the Perth Community Flood Aid. Sometime around 2005, I was approached by a consulting engineer to discuss a proposed housing development on Craigie Hill Golf Course. We discussed the challenging ground conditions and terrain and the flood history of the nearby Craigie Burn. I advised that I couldn't support the proposal and I was not supportive of further built development in the area. I felt that there was no further capacity to cope with any increase in surface water runoff from built development. You could say that I felt that it was as if we were at a tipping point for development and flooding in the Craigieburn catchment. In 2005, we were aware of significant floods that had occurred in 1981, 1993 and 2002 on the Craigieburn. 20 years on, and where are we now? In 2005, Broxton Business Park was being built and the development around Coldstream Avenue area was being completed. In 2007, there was an extension to the park and ride, and in 2014, Persimmon started construction of new homes on the site of the former Bell's headquarters. In 2019, construction of Stevens West Woodland and the Bellway Homes Charlotte Gate development started. Then in 2020, the next significant flooding event occurred. The flood record suggests that the Craigieburn was experiencing about one significant flood roughly every 10 years or so over the 40-year period up to 2020. However, since 2020, the frequency of these floods has increased dramatically, with significant events in 2020, 2022, 2023 and 2025. That's 4 significant floods in the last 6 years compared to the 4 in the previous 40 years up to 2020. I believe it's no coincidence that this sharp increase in flood frequency has happened at the same time as we have seen a significant increase in development within the catchment. The flood risk not only comes from Craigieburn and its tributaries, but also from surface water and Scottish Water combined sewer. In the autumn-winter period of 2023 to 24, the access road to the golf club was flooded at least 4 times. The Scottish Water drainage infrastructure in the Cherrybank and Craigie areas can no longer cope with the new development in the catchment. Residents in Craigie are now suffering flooding on a frequent basis as a result. Surcharge of contaminated water from the combined sewer is becoming a regular occurrence whenever there is heavy rain falling on Perth. It's happening a number of times each year. Some of you might be thinking, but do SUDs not help to reduce surface water runoff? All these recent developments will have associated SUDs. However, SUDs require three important things: good design, proper construction, and regular maintenance. And there will be a requirement to replace some of these items from time to time. Who is checking all these things, and what happens if we have back-to-back storms? If we focus on the proposed Craigie Hill development, the access to the new development floods frequently from the watercourse, from surface water, and from combined sewers. In the larger events, floodwater has poured across Necessity Brae, down Low Road, and flooded both properties and the access road to the application site. The applicants propose an emergency access, but it too is at risk of flooding from a small burn. The Craigie Burn flood study advises that there is a 50% annual probability of flooding from this small watercourse. That's a 1 and 2 year return period. On the 21st of July this year, we witnessed both proposed routes in and out of the application site underwater. Woodside Crescent and Queen's Avenue, which would connect the proposed emergency access to other areas of Perth, were also flooded. Development of the site would be contrary to Policy 22 of NPF4. There is no available capacity for new connections in the Scottish Water Sewer at Cherrybank. To address this, a storage tank will be required on site to store the foul water from the proposed 175 homes. SUDs are proposed to address the increase in surface water draining from the site. The drainage strategy and master plan documents are unclear whether dry or wet basins are proposed. The consultants state that 3,500 cubic metres of storage volume would be required. I carried out my own estimates based on what little information is provided in the reports, and I believe the storage requirements could be about double this amount. I am aware that today we are dealing only with planning in principle for this development. However, I believe the Council should consider a further development in the Craigieburn catchment as sustainable or desirable when the last 6 years has demonstrated that recent development has resulted in a significant increase in flooding in downstream areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can ask you to take your seats again now, and we will ask you to come back up when we're doing questions to all the deputies. Thank you. I'd now like to invite up all the supporters and the agent for the applicant. So David Mitchell, Pauline Marshall, Alan Cargill and Jamie Hall, and also the agent Derek Ross. If you'd like to come up and make your joint deputation, you have a maximum of 15 minutes, and the Deputy Provost will again time this. You have a maximum of 15 minutes collectively.
Good morning. My name is David Mitchell. I am the current captain of Craigie Hill Golf Club. The first tee shot was taken at Craigie Hill in 1911. Since then, our records show that thousands of Perth citizens and visitors have enjoyed playing our, some would call, unique golf course. Many of our members have represented our club at a county and national level, and most recently, Danny Young, a lifetime member of Craigie Hill, qualified for the British Open at Portrush in Northern Ireland. Next year, Danny is the first Perth-born player to qualify for the DP World Tour and will tee it up with Rory McIlroy and other great golfers around the world. It's great to see Danny putting Perth in the global map. As captain of the golf club, it is my responsibility to continue this legacy. However, golf is changing. Although golf participation across the UK continues to increase, the way it is consumed has changed, resulting in a decline in club golf membership. This means that many clubs have lost a significant amount of income, and many have closed or are on the brink of closure. At Craigie Hill, we do not want to become the next statistic. For the past 20 years, we have been fighting against this decline, and if it were not for the efforts of past captains, we may have closed our doors many years ago. 6 years ago, it was clear to me that more effort and time was not going to work. We needed to take a different, more radical path if we are to continue the legacy. In 2019, our members voted unanimously to explore a plan to transition to a 9-hole golf course. 5 years ago, we met with you, the council, to share our thoughts. And whilst you were sympathetic with our plight, you rightly told us we needed to create a plan that will deliver a net gain for Perth. So 5 years later, here we are. I'm proud to say that we have listened to your feedback from that very first meeting, and I want to explain how I have personally driven our partnership with Kilmac to deliver an ambitious plan with compassion for our community that is delivered with the highest levels of integrity in line with the values framework of the council. This is a purpose-led development that has been shaped by our club members. After all, our members are citizens who need to be proud of the legacy we create. We have focused on 4 key principles. Net gain for Perth. This project had to deliver a net gain for Perth, and I'm pleased to say it will, and at absolutely no cost to the public purse. Continued employment for our staff, and we wanted to minimise the green belt impact. We wanted a development with the minimum number of houses to make it work, rather than the maximum number of houses for profit. We have ended up with 175 houses, 45% of which are affordable or accessible. So I hope you all have a feel for our ambition, compassion and integrity. Every step along the way, I can guarantee you that we will deliver this plan with the highest levels of professionalism. If refused, the club will cease to operate. And I want to highlight what will happen in that event. There will be no net gain for Perth. There will be a net loss. There will be a loss of jobs, loss of golf, and a loss of amenity and access for the many groups and individuals we currently support. Our clubhouse will most go likely into a state of dereliction and attract the negative social behaviours associated with such a space. Buckie Braes will fall further in a state of disrepair, and the land ultimately will revert to the landowner or the highest bidder. What this means is there will be no active management of the waterways and tree belt, and the likely outcome will see an increased flooding risk. None of us want to see that. Thank you for your time, and I'll now hand over to Derek Ross.
Provost, councillors, good morning. As Project Development Lead and Club Member, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Craigie Golf Club has spent the past 5 years undertaking a rigorous process of technical, legal, regulatory and planning due diligence. This was essential given the proposal in the LDP2 and involves a partial change of greenbelt use. It is important to note that, as acknowledged by your own policy team, the site could not be promoted through LDP3 due to financial constraints. Delays caused by COVID, the additional 9-month review and flood risk meant the site would otherwise have reached full council 2 years ago. That review, alongside detailed design work, has been scrutinised by both SEPA and the council's flooding team. They confirm the site is not within the floodplain, does not present a flood risk, and in fact offers opportunities for betterment. Scottish Water has also confirmed capacity. These conclusions are based on robust scientific evidence. The upfront investment, diligence and stakeholder engagement undertaken by the club has been extensive. The outcome was a planning submission that attracted no objections from statutory consultees, but did deliver late holding objections raised by transportation and biodiversity on the day the report 25/221 was released. With earlier communication, those matters could have and would have been resolved in advance. The club did put forward a deferral for today to put the the committee back to deal with these items, but that was unfortunately refused. Let me briefly address the main concerns raised. Transportation. Concerns were linked to the recent approval of the adjacent Aldi store. However, early modelling demonstrates that the additional traffic from Aldi will have no significant impact on movement around the site or the wider road network. This can be progressed by condition. Forestry and biodiversity. This application is for planning permission in principle. Detailed design and tree-related impacts will be considered at the next stage. An incorrect mapping system has overstated the woodland baseline at the proposed suds pond, and no ancient woodland will be affected. Only limited plantation and native woodland require removal due to topography and road engineering, and again, this could be progressed by condition. Greenbelt has also been cited as a principal reason for refusal. The housing element accounts for only around 12 hectares, about 1/3 of the site. The remainder continues as golf course and open space, sport and recreation uses consistent with Greenbelt policy. The housing lies on the urban edge bounded by the M90, providing a defensible boundary and avoiding any risk of settlement coalescence. This is a site-specific proposal with unique community benefits, not a precedent for wider Greenbelt release. We have qualified that the site is not at risk of flooding, but it is acknowledged and accepted that Low Road does retain water at times of extreme flood. The flooding issue raised as a reason for refusal relates to a secondary emergency access point. This is currently an issue locally, and through completion of the Craigieburn study, the Council's flood risk team has identified a solution to address this situation at Queen's Avenue and Queen's Court. This is designed to create dry access and protect 22 existing properties. Funding has been secured and works are being programmed to start from 2028. We acknowledge the Council's flood protection priorities and commit to condition occupation of any affordable or private home prior to the completion of these works. This can be managed through a Section 75 agreement, and SEPA and PKC flooding and/or transportation teams have not objected to the application, and no technical objections have been raised about emergency access other than through planning. Again, this application aligns with key national and local policies and priorities, including supporting sport and recreation, delivering affordable housing, enabling 20-minute neighbourhoods, improving sustainable transport, and enhancing biodiversity. MPF 4 must be applied holistically and not selectively. Viewed in full, this proposal delivers clear, balanced benefits. Provost, councillors, this is a unique site-specific solution. It secures the long-term future of Craigiehill Golf Club while delivering a sports and community hub of real value. We respectfully ask you to approve the principle of development subject to appropriate conditions and legal agreements that safeguard delivery of the community hub, flood protection measures and supporting infrastructure, ensuring that the housing element underpins the master plan as a whole. Thank you.
Good morning, Provost and councillors. I'm Athol MacDonald. I stand before you today not just as a CEO of a construction company that has for over 20 years employed more than 180 people in the Tayside area, delivering groundwork projects such as Perth High, Blair Gowrie Recreational Facility and Mill Street, but also as a Craigie boy, born and bred. I've lived in the community for 56 years. I first joined Craigiehill Golf Club at the age of 12. After school, I used to head down to the course, squeeze in around, grab a subsidised tea in the clubhouse, and then head back out for another 18 holes. This club just didn't give me a place to golf. It taught me manners, respect, and what it means to be part of a community. Given the topography of the course, it probably helped me drive and determination that I've carried through my life. To this day, I still play with the friends that I grew up with on that golf course. I know Craigie, not just from maps or reports, but from lived experience. I grew up in Queen Street, where my mother still lives, so I know what it's like to be flooded firsthand. I bought my first home with my wife in Croft Park, choosing to remain in the floodplain of the Craigieburn, and I still live locally in Viewlands Road. Craigie has always been home, and I understand as well as anyone what this community needs. The golf club and surrounding area is already a fantastic community facility, but has the potential to be even better. With this project, we can protect the club for the next 100 years and enhance the wider community offering. That includes improving the walks through bucket braes, making them more accessible and enjoyable for everyone. And it's not just about preserving what we already have. This project will increase the facilities within the clubhouse, giving access to other groups, becoming less reliant on volunteers, and make the course more accessible to families and less able golfers, ensuring that Craigiehill truly becomes a place for everyone. The project also brings not only affordable housing, but accessible housing to the inner city, something that is much needed and will make a real difference to families across Perth. I know flooding is a real concern for the local residents. During the flood consultation hosted by Pete Wisher in 2022, I committed to ensuring the design would not exacerbate flooding and supported the flood group to commission an independent review of the proposal, which was paid for by the club. The review and subsequent expert assessments confirm the scheme will not add to the flood risk. In fact, it will help mitigate in localised areas, especially in the Woodside area. In addition, should we be successful, the golf club will maintain these flood facilities under long-term contracts, ensuring they work as intended for generations. I have acted openly and transparently throughout this process, committing Kilmarnock's resources and finances, not for the short-term gain, but to support Craigie and save a great golf club. I'm extremely proud of the way our team have acted throughout this process and of the quality of the proposal we put before you with the clear local support that underpins it. Now the decision rests with you. I can only hope that you share the same aspirations I do to see Craigie thrive, to safeguard a club with over a century of history, and to deliver lasting benefits for the people of Perth. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Good morning, Provost, Councillors. My name is Jamie Hall and I'm Scottish Golf's Regional Development Manager for Central Scotland. In real terms, the way people consume golf has changed significantly in recent years, with younger generations moving away from the traditional club model we're familiar with. This is towards shorter formats of the game, increasing the use of technology within a family-friendly environment where participation is just one of many options available. The plans put forward by Craigiehill Golf Club demonstrate not just a desire to safeguard the future of this historic venue, but to create an easily accessible facility which will provide long-term health benefits to a broader demographic via the provision of other sports on the site, as well as much-needed housing. Golf is proven to have a significant positive impact on physical and mental health, and unlike many other sports, can be played into old age. The proposed reconfiguration of the course will make it more accessible by removing some of the more severe slopes, ensuring more people can continue to learn, play and enjoy golf. The wider media coverage of the club's proposals has attracted significant interest from around the country, with many clubs looking to find solutions to very similar issues.
Thank you very much. If you could just stay where you were, folks, just because we're about to do questions. And if the objectors could also come back up, please. And we'll now invite questions to the deputies from councillors. If you have a question for any of the deputations, if you could please put a Q in the chat. Since there are quite a lot of you in terms of delegations, if the supporters can stay here and if the objectors can come to this lectern, it just gives you a bit more space because you're quite crowded over there. First question is from Bailey and it's for the applicant.
Thank you very much. Thank you to both groups for coming along and saying your piece today. It's always helps us in our decision-making process greatly. My question is actually for the club captain, please. You mentioned the financial challenges that the club has and the guidance the council previously gave that any development has to be a net gain for Perth. With that being the case, why is it that we have housing coming forward today? Why sacrifice, and what's the thinking behind sacrificing a large part of your course when you could instead develop renewables like wind and solar, and those could maybe be put around the course, delivering that net gain for the city in a more clearly defined way while avoiding you to need to reduce its size? It's somewhat a rhetorical question, but interested to see what your answer is. Thank you.
We needed something that could cross-fund the redevelopment of our existing clubhouse. Essentially, it's finances. We're running somewhere between 25 to 30,000 pounds a year loss. So for us to achieve what we believed was achievable, the initial plan was simply sell the land, happy days, and we kick the can down the road. We didn't think that was a sustainable process, if you like. So we had to build what you now see before you, which is, it gives us much more to offer the general public. So the key for us to get what we wanted, the objective that we had, was to build this bigger, wider, more appealing centre, was to use the cross funding from the sale of the house, the sale of the housing back into fund what we need to do. Now, we're a CASC, a community amateur sports club. So we need to get that cross funding. We can't just sort of trouser the profits. So it'll be sunk into the development that we have in plan that you've all seen to develop what we get. And that's the simplest answer I can give you at this point. Is that okay? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rebeck next, and you have questions for both supporters and the objectors, so you can proceed with them.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I get the net gain thing, actually, but for me, it is about flooding. So, is that better, Provost? Thank you. I kind of get the net gain thing, but for me, it is about flooding. So, two questions. I'd be really keen to hear from both sides and actually about it. And Malcolm touched upon the suds ponds, which I think was helpful. So, is a question about how effective the suds ponds are. That's the first question. The second question is about proposed work in Craigieburn and how will that affect this application, which is touched upon in the papers. But I would just quite like to hear from both sides, if that's not a pejorative way to put it, please.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as we've said, it's been a long journey since, for over the 5 years in terms of assessing, flood risk on the site, and we have employed what we believe to be the best in the industry to identify that. I suppose the first thing I'll say is that the internal flood team at PKC and also SEPA have assessed all of the design considerations, and there has been no objection. I'm correct in saying that SEPA came in and met with the planning team as well with PKC to run through the proposals, and again left. And again, no objection was gifted. This is planning permission in principle. So for the suds ponds, the existing drainage runoff is calculated. The hydrological test is done. It's identifying, at prime storm events with climate change figures that are in there as well, which then generates the ultimate volume of suds ponds that are required. That, as Malcolm has said, has generated, figures of 3,500 cube that have to be contained on site. These will be, developed as we move through, hopefully to detailed submission. But we believe at this stage that these are robust. We have the land take to incorporate that on site. And ultimately, in terms of the maintenance of these facilities, it will be the greenkeeping staff that will be on under a facilities management agreement, looking at the overall site, and they will then be in charge of ensuring that if there is a storm event, they're in there assessing if there is silt build-up, these will be removed, and they will be effective. So, I mean, they are the recognised design for new development. SUDS is the way to not, deal with flood, but is to slow the water with a hydro brake so that it gets controlled back into the water course. And that is where we believe, the club believe, that we have a sensible and acceptable solution with no objection from any of the authorities.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, SUDs are really a matter for the local authority. SEPA does not comment on SUDs. Yeah, the important thing about SUDs is that they need to be designed properly and they need to be constructed properly. And then there needs to be a proper maintenance programme. And at times, some of the things, say porous pavement and things like that, will need replaced after a certain amount of time. Sorry. Yeah, so I did some initial calculations myself, and I came up with a storage requirement of about double what the consultants had come up with. It was unfortunate that the consultants hadn't actually included any of the calculation in their report. I used to review a lot of reports when I worked for SEPA, and normally the calculations are actually included so that they can be reviewed properly. But that's a matter that would come up at detailed planning if we get to that stage.
Thank you. I don't know if there's any comment on, or if it's appropriate to have an answer on the proposed Craigie Hill works as well. Sorry, the second part of the question was about proposed Craigie Burn works. I don't know if that's appropriate at this point, because that may affect the.
Yes, Councillor Raywick. I don't think I can probably develop that any further than the Craigie Burn study identified that there was a solution for Queen's Court, Queen's Avenue, that would then create dry access that would then benefit the 22 properties. That is currently going through design stage. It was put up at the Climate Change Committee. It was passed for that to go ahead. The budget has been approved for that and design is underway, and it is anticipated that that will be 2028 that will kick off. The golf club is happy to commit that if the funding had not come through at that point and we did have all our technical consents in place, that as part of the overall infrastructure delivery, we would then front fund that to then accelerate the works. And Kilmac, as a reputable engineer, would be happy to work with the council on the flood design to then hit that target date, to keep costs low, and then to benefit not only the Queen's Terrace, but Perth itself, and then unlock the development for Craigie Hill to survive and to create this vision that we have.
Thank you very much. I know it's a little bit premature to ask that, but I do think it's kind of vaguely relevant, but thank you.
Yeah, the Craigie Burn flood study is recommending a replacement culvert in Queen's Avenue. That will not impact at all on the emergency access to the application site because it's a distance upstream. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braun, your question next.
Thanks, Provost. This is a question to the applicants, if I may. You mentioned about the site. It's obviously in Greenbelt. This is the core of the situation. You mentioned it only accounts for a third of the site, but the policy itself doesn't get into numbers. It's Greenbelt land. That's it. End of story. To sort of override that, would you have, or do you feel that there is some definitive need for this housing in the area that would possibly override the fact that it's Greenbelt? Or would you have access to something like that?
Councillor Braun, yeah. There was a marketing assessment done by 2 local estate agents as well. We listened at the consultation events that there was a real demand for accessible bungalows on the within Perth to unlock housing through the ladder as such. So that's when we assessed the site. We had 200 units initially, dropped it to 175. As you can appreciate, the cost of bungalows on the development. But so we took advice from the public, from various councillors as well, and that is where we introduced as many bungalows as could be on site. So we've got 2 reports from reputable agents that said no, there is a real demand for that on top of the affordable housing. So that is why we've incorporated that need with the housing crisis for affordable, and then ultimately for accessibility for bungalows. We felt that with putting 45% of the development producing that, then that was a very good argument in terms of demand, and ultimately NPF4 within 20-minute neighbourhoods. We have the accessibility aspect of people getting in and out from the site as well, walking, cycling. So again, that was the other reason in terms of the justification for Greenbelt. We have said a third, but if you look in between the street scenes, there is extensive, new tree planting that will be incorporated as well. So it's actually less than a third when you take that into consideration. And I will then stress again that there is no risk of coalescence just because of the pocket of where the site is, and you still then retain a massive swathe of Greenbelt, which is going to be existing and forevermore at the top, which is for the golf course and for walkways that we've incorporated through the site. The top of the site is again protected because there is ancient woodland all the way around the top of the housing. So that was another reason that we're more than happy again that there will never be any additional housing. And at that point, we get the blessing of the former landowner, who is Moncrief Estate, and they gave their blessing on the basis that we were creating this sort of destination and community-led project.
Okay, thank you. Next, Bailey McLaren. Can I just ask all speakers to make sure the microphone is right in front of you, because otherwise it's very hard for those online to hear what's being said.
Thank you, Provost. My question, I'm going back to what Mr. Smith said at the beginning, exceptional circumstances. I'm looking for a bit more economic evidence of the requirement of this deviation from the 18 to 19. You've said that the golf club membership has been in decline. Golf usage is changing. Do you have evidence that actually making this change to the 9-hole course with the topography will still sustain the ongoing future of Craigie Hill in the first instance? Thank you.
There has been detailed consultation done with the likes of Scottish Golf and Sports Scotland on the sort of dynamic nature of the change. There has been a confidential business plan has been submitted in support of the application. That clearly shows the trend, and in terms of the drop in profitability and membership. It talks about the future demand of golf, as Scottish Golf have quoted in terms of the demand for that type of facility, the 9-hole, the quick play. It has 18 tee boxes as well. It has a mix of beginner, intermediate and advanced tee boxes, so it's all inclusive. And indeed, when you bring in a community hub that has also, it will have retail offerings, it has offices, it has community space, it has cafe, it has restaurant with the walks, etc. We anticipate the growth in that model through the business plan to show up to 350 members. Now, the 350 members, it will be at a price point as well, and that is in the business plan as well. And that identifies that, yes, we will see growth, and we probably will see, it is a business plan. But again, in terms of the nature of the course at the top of the hill and the offering that is there, we are satisfied that, yes, the efforts we put in are there. Ultimately, there will be an investment in a 7-figure investment in the clubhouse as well, which then creates that community hub in its own right.
I'd just like to cite, if I can, a Golf Foundation survey from 2023, which showed that 40% of the UK population engaged in golf in some format in the preceding 12 months. Only 30% of those were in traditional 18-hole golf. 70% of that 40% slice of the population we're consuming golf in the shorter format, for example, 9-hole golf. We're seeing huge growth in these types of facilities. For example, the RNA-backed Golfit in Glasgow, which has taken over a former council-run course which had fallen into disrepair, and also Kingsfield Leisure near Linlithgow, which they're both prime examples of 9-hole facilities which are thriving with this change in the way golf is being consumed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen, next, you have 2 questions.
Thank you, Provost. I have a couple of questions, and I'm happy to ask them and come back if needs be. So, first of all, I'm trying to understand if Craigie Hill Golf Club is considered to be responsible for the current flood issues in the area.
Sorry, who's your question for?
It's for both parties, really.
Okay, we'll go to the applicants first.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, Craigie Hill Golf Club is part of the catchment area for the Craigie Burn, so it will contribute to the runoff into the burn. Where the burn connects, the majority of Craigie Hill does come down into the Woodside area. So it's basically from the Woodside area that the major effects will take place. But it is basically just part of the catchment area at the moment. So the whole idea of the design is that the water that runs off of Craigie Hill, which under a standard design will be shown as if it runs off a green brownfield site. Craigie Hill is a rock-based site, so the water runs off far quicker than it would out of, you know, a standardised field. So yes is the answer to that. Craigie Hill currently contributes to the flooding, and the design is obviously there to interact with that and ensure it doesn't create any more flooding following the, you know, the development. Insulation, if anything, can assist by slowing it down under major events. So,
thank you, and for the objector.
Yeah, so Craigie Hill Golf Course contributes as a greenfield site to the runoff that goes into the Craigie Burn itself. There are certain details about the Craigie Hill site that you could say provide a bit of attenuation. For instance, there is a very small reservoir which is used for the storage of water for watering the greens and such like. That will provide a small amount of attenuation, but other than that, I would say it performs very much like a greenfield site.
Thank you for the answers that I got there. Mr. McConaughey, I'd like to come back to you if it's okay, and about to your superior knowledge in this area, so hopefully you can give me some answers here. You suggested that SUDs are only good with good design, proper build, and proper and regular maintenance. So if that was provided here, would you still be objecting?
When I made that comment, I'm talking in very general terms. The full design of the SUDs, I know we're talking about some detention, well, holes in the ground essentially. The detail isn't there to say whether they're going to be dry detention ponds or they are going to be ponds which are going to be wet permanently. I think part of the design might also be porous drives. I'm not sure about that, but things like porous drives Yeah, the figures usually quoted for how well they work are usually done in a kind of laboratory kind of condition, but over time these porous surfaces get clogged up and such like and need replacing. But until we see the design for the full design for the development, yeah, it's difficult to say whether for how much maintenance they will actually require. I mean, the basins themselves will collect silt and gravel and stuff coming off the site, and part of the maintenance will have to be removing all this stuff. But I believe the applicants are proposing that the greenkeeping staff would be responsible for that maintenance. So long as Craigie Hill remains as a golf course and there are greenkeeping staff there, then that's fine. One of the questions I would say is what happens if Craigie Hill 9-hole course ceases to exist? What happens to the suds then? Thank you.
Basically, the SUD system will be fully adopted by the authorities and it will be maintained under that, but there will also be the factoring in place where the greenkeeping staff will undertake their own maintenance with a layer on top of that. So in the event that the 9-hole golf course fails, which must admit, I'm not sure I wanted to talk about that in this meeting when we're actually trying to turn it to a 9-hole golf course. But in the event that it does, then it will just revert to standard maintenance. And Derek he knows more than me, but if there's a factoring facility in place, that factoring will then be taken on by an external party because the factoring will be paid for by the household.
Yeah, that's correct. There will be a deed of conditions and there will be a facilities management agreement in place. So the fact that the factor will be the greenkeeping staff for all of the site. And don't get me wrong, I think through the business plan and through Scottish Golf's intent there, this golf course will be here, this 9-hole golf course will be here because of everything that's around it. But if that eventuality ever happened, then a factor would come in, paid by the residents to undertake the maintenance to ensure that there was no issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those answers. I'm happy to leave it at that. Move on to my next question. Is that okay? Or do you want me to come back later?
Can you make your next question quite short then, please, and we'll get it finished now.
Okay, well, it's similarly related. In the event of delays in the council's planned flood-related works, what solutions are proposed by the applicant? Now, you've possibly covered that already, but I need you to just clarify it for me. Thank you.
If we are successful in securing planning permission in principle, today we will move forward with a detailed application. That detailed application will lift it up a gear as well, just for the extreme detail. The timescales associated with that, realistically, would be an application would go in first quarter of next year, 9 months for detailed consent, a further 6 months for other statutory approvals. There is also a commitment that although in terms of the statutory policy response that we got, which did not object, but did indeed agree that it was a significant departure, but ultimately looked at balance and said that if this development was to proceed by condition, they would request that the works to the clubhouse and also the golf course would be completed by the 75th unit. Kilmac and the club are actually confirming that an obligation through Section 75 agreement, the works to the golf course and the clubhouse will be completed prior to the occupation of any affordable home or private home. So that would actually take us through to 2029, sort of second half of 2029, until we would look for the flood works to be completed. If we can't move through a design now in 2025 with the help of Kilmac, when funding has been put in place and we can't install the works and undertake the works to Queen's Queen's Court and Queen's Avenue, I don't know where we will be then. We're talking about 4 years here. So we will look, as well as we've said, with regards to the funding, we would look to fund the works as part of our infrastructure package and then receive that once the funding came through. So that is an obligation on behalf of the club and Kilmac.
Thank you. Can you switch your microphone off? Thank you. Councillor Forbes next with your questions.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. First question is for, I think it was Malcolm again. I'm afraid you're the expert on flooding, so a few questions for you. It's very similar, actually, to the previous question. It's about the comment you made that SUDs need to be designed properly. So my first question is it your opinion that these are not designed properly? And my second question for you is, given your experience with SEPA, are you surprised that they haven't objected to this?
SEPA doesn't comment on surface water matters like SUDs. That's left to the local authority to make comments. So it's the Perth Kinross flooding team that would review the design of the SUDs and give their comments. But I would say that the design of the SUDs at the moment, there was a kind of a broad brush report. It was at odds with the master plan in terms of what it was talking about, whether it was dry detention ponds or whether they would be wet ponds. The difference being that if they're wet ponds, they need to be much larger. But the initial calculations that I did, I came up with a storage requirement about double what the consultants had come up with. But they've got access to all the information, and I don't. I can only base my estimates on what is actually published within the reports.
The drainage strategy report that has been submitted by the design consultant on behalf of the club, that looks at both drainage from the new development and also looks at drainage from the site. So that is to put ponds in to slow surface water drain off from the greenfield site and the golf course, as well as the development itself. The development itself went into the detail of both foul, both surface, where the water channels would go with regards to the levels and the engineering design that has been taken forward, which is far more than any planning permission in principle application would normally see. SEPA themselves did comment on the access, and that was and ultimately did not object to that. But I can say that the council did ask SEPA to come in, and as Malcolm says, they do not normally comment on internal design, internal runoff, but they came in and sat down with them and had a meeting, left that meeting and did not object to the proposal and did not object to the proposal.
Thanks. And my second question was for you. You mentioned earlier on, I think you used the phrase an incorrect mapping system, but I didn't grasp what that was about. Can you expand on that for us, please?
Yeah, if you're able to. Yeah, so the incorrect mapping is that the the ancient woodland ID 45 polygon that is actually there indicates where there has been ancient woodland previously. But that actually then encroaches into the existing design of the golf course. So I've just learned this morning, it was in 1911 when obviously the first sort of tee was obviously taken there. So there definitely has not been any woodland within sort of part of that polygon sort of since then. So, and even sort of potentially sort of before that. So that sort of very long triangle is indicating where there has been ancient woodland. So the ecological habitat survey that's been done is actually giving you sort of that baseline indication of what exists there already, along with the arboricultural assessment that's been done. So the design for the proposed development has actually just looked at the design of the green, and the SUDs are actually within the green. They don't actually impact any of the ancient woodland. So the SUDs, again, obviously, because we're previously talking about that. In regards to biodiversity, they're really good for biodiversity because, again, we surround those with a lot of wetland meadows and wildflower meadows sort of just in that area. So there'll be an increase in biodiversity within that area. The report, so that's when it comes to this incorrect mapping. So everybody's referring to this polygon which is there, but you could quite clearly see, obviously when it's overlapped onto the existing golf course, that there's actually no trees in some of those areas. And where there are existing trees, those ones will not be taken out and they will not be impacted. So if you actually have a look at the sort of ecological impact assessment report, there are some maps there which actually do indicate what is the baseline that is actually existing. So that's really just sort of indicates that incorrect mapping of that. So you'll actually find that within a lot of these ancient woodland polygons, they will be over areas which have changed and sometimes even in agricultural fields. So they're an indicator of what's actually been there previously and what you would like to obviously maintain. What is there is being maintained. Okay, so hopefully I'll answer your question.
Okay, Councillor Forbes, you have a very, very quick follow-up.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to be blunt, but we don't know who you are or what your background or involvement in this project is. Can you just give us that, please?
Yeah, my apologies. I kind of just went into answering that. My name's Irene Tierney. I'm director of Imteco Limited. We are the company that did the ecological assessments for the project.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lane, please.
Thanks, Provost. I think it's 3 quite short questions for Derek. Derek, why are we here at full council? What's the premise for us being here? And this isn't a planning application that goes through the planning department.
The reason we're all here is because it is a major application that is classed as being contrary to the local development plan. And then it doesn't go before
plan, MPF4 and on the Greenbelt. So the other comment you made about the need for housing, you mean we'll know how many houses have been in designated sites within, not out with the Greenbelt or anything else. And we were talking about the need for housing and the housing emergency. How many houses are to be built or allocated within the Perth boundary?
I don't know that specific number. What my direction of travel was that we are looking here to create a community, to retain a community hub, to retain a golf course. The question, we are looking at what we class as inner city development. We are looking at MPF4 in terms of type and mix. That was the reason for going, obviously, affordable housing crisis plus accessible housing. It's a different type of site within the city rather than as you're mentioning, these large wide release sites at Bertha Park, etc. So it's 100, yeah.
Okay, thanks. We'll ask officers about what we've already approved in designated sites before we go on to the Greenbelt site. I think that would be, so I've heard a lot about it. Are you talking that, do you see this proposal actually as filling a housing need, or is it really to quite, I can understand why you would want to, but is it really to save a business, i.e. the golf club? What's the genesis of this proposal?
To be honest with you, the genesis is to save the golf course in its fundamental form. Beyond that, the housing is the facility to do that. And what we've done is we've been as sympathetic and with the choice of housing that we put into the area that is there.
Thank you. So then again to Derek, do you not think if this is approved by council, it's setting a precedence of principle for other organisations, clubs or businesses that are facing financial difficulty, that they could apply to develop pieces of Greenbelt? If that's the genesis, is to save the club.
Yeah, I think that what I tried to explained in my delivery is that this site is probably, it's an exception to the rule in terms of where its location sits. The fact that we are retaining, a significant amount of green belt off the M90, and ultimately we will not. There is no risk of coalescence, and there's no risk of creating that, that risk in the future. And we are a cask. The questions you're asking are very, very valid, but that is why when we sat down at day one 5 years ago and came through this process, this was about a process of creating a destination, and for that reason, we don't believe that it's going to create any risk in the future for setting precedent.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask officers the same question. Thanks. So happy for you to.
Just going back to the need for housing, as far as the settlement boundaries on the LDP Policy 6, in relation to that, there is no shortfall in housing land. According to the Perth Kinross LDP 3 2027 evidence report, topic paper 20 homes of July 2024, at a build rate of 850 units per year, there is sufficient land to last nearly 20 years, almost double that of LPD3's annualised minimum tender land agreement requirement. It also states that there is more than enough non-constrained housing land identified in the most recent HLA to accommodate even the highest housing need calculation.
Thank you. I won't have to ask the officers that question now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Councillor Peter Barrett next, please.
Can I just add on, just to close, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, in terms of the housing numbers, we were very aware of that, and hence that's why we have delivered 44% affordable and accessible, which is 77 out of the 175. So you're left then with a small number of 81, which are your standard family housing. So that's all I'd like to say.
Okay, if I can just, I'm going to have to impose a bit of rule here. Unless you're directly invited to speak through the questions by the councillors or myself, I would like to ask both sides not to jump in. I know you all want to provide as much information as possible, and we're going to try and get that out. We've got a lot more questions still to come, so you will probably get asked the questions, but this is going to have to be a bit more orderly. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Provost, and I think my questions are kind of on the subjects that we're just discussing now. In the context of an enabling development and your initial discussions with the council 5 years ago, what was the advice and response from the council regarding the scale of the intrusion into the green belt? And also the absence of any shortage of housing development land in the immediate area, as well as in the greater Perth housing market area. And going back to Bailey's question, what options did you explore to minimise the intrusion into the green belt and the number of houses, because we've heard that there's 175 houses, 25% are affordable and 18% accessible, but 175 houses is a considerable intrusion into the green belt, and I'm wondering what the response that the council gave you in those early discussions was with regard to that, and how did you take it on board?
Hi, Councillor Barrett. Yes, in terms of the pre-application that was submitted and the advice that had been sought, there was no real discussion on unit numbers. The consultation at that point was on, can you access it, can you drain it? Once you submit your plans, then we'll consider it. The feedback we got, obviously, through the consultee response from policy did identify that 175 units in terms of where it sits in the green belt is significant. Again, what the policy paper did qualify was that it would have to be a balanced decision. There's no doubt it is in the green belt. It doesn't sit as the original application that came in years ago, looked at developing the whole of the golf course, and the golf course was going to move off of Craigie Hill. The housing sits below the ridge line, can't be seen from the M90, is in a pocket that, let's not kid ourselves. If this hadn't been granted and gifted by Moncrief Estate to the golf club, post-war, this would have been built. Housing would have been on this site. This would have been part of the boundary. So that is all I can say on that point, is that if you look through the report, if you look through the consultee responses, they have highlighted about the 175 units. They referred, as Councillor Lane has said, just about the overall numbers of units that are ready and waiting on these larger greenfield release sites. But this is, you could classify it as not a brownfield site, but where it sits, and due to its cross-funding, it is delivering a solution and longevity for both the community, both for golf and indeed creating new houses within an area, I would say, compliant with NPF4.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Provost next, please.
Thank you very much. This is a question for the objectors, but it could be answered, I'm sure, by the applicant as well. What is the total area of the Craigieburn catchment area upstream of the golf course? And what is the percentage of that total catchment area that is taken up by the golf course site? Thank you.
I'm afraid I don't have all these details. The Craigieburn catchment now is about six square kilometres, and I think to where the Buckyburn joins, so basically Cherry Bank, I would say is probably about 3, so probably about half the catchment comes in at the junction with the Buckyburn. I don't know offhand what the area of the Craigie Hill golf course is, but I'm sure the applicants can fill that one.
I think what we need to look at there is that the area of the catchment for the Craigieburn is not the Craigieburn in isolation. The flooding is where the Schoorenburn attaches itself to the Craigieburn. If you take the catchment area over the entire area, which we classify as the flooding, I've not got the numbers to hand either, Malcolm, but you'll be under 5%. The Craigie Hill catchment, you need to consider the Schoorenburn, which basically causes the Craigieburn floods in, or the Schoorenburn comes in to the Craigieburn, and that's where the majority of your flooding is coming out of. So I think you've got to look at the two of them together, which that means that the Craigie Hill golf course, I'm going to throw my hat over it and say it'll be less than 5% of the full area catchment, I would think, but it is a guess.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move to that question to officers. Point of clarification from the Leader of the Council.
I just wanted a point of clarity there where we heard that it could almost be declared a brownfield site. Can we just have clarity that this isn't a green belt site we're talking about, not, as Derek suggested, possibly could confuse some people by saying it could be considered a brownfield site?
Yes, we would consider it as primarily a greenfield site. Obviously, there is the existing clubhouse on the site, which is a very, 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 very small element of the site. But yes, greenfield by and large, overwhelmingly.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mayor next, please.
Thank you, Provost. My question is, I think, for David from the club, and it's a very general question to do with the pre-application consultations that you held in April and again in August this year. I see that the representations in favour of your planning proposal were 215 and against the objections were 107. I wonder if you could give us an idea of how many people actually attended your consultation events over the 2 sessions, just a rough number if you don't have the exact figures, and if there's any correlation between the representations in favour with the number of golf club members who attended the consultations? Thank you.
Probably in total over the day, over the 2 days, it's probably 60, 80 above each day. How you tie that into the number of positive responses and number of negatives, I don't really know. Some people may not have been able to attend the open days, but like the thought of the proposal that we've laid out. Similarly, I would imagine the same would be the answer for those that opposed it. They just chose to oppose it because they saw it either on the planning website, they heard it from a friend, or they were perhaps encouraged to by either us or those that oppose us to put their notes into the responses that were given at the time. So I can't draw a direct correlation between the numbers. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Next, Councillor Welch.
Thank you, Provost. I've played golf at the course. I've enjoyed family celebrations at the course, and I can empathise with their financial position. Kilmacker are a well-respected and successful local company. I've got two quick questions. First question is in essence, what consideration, essentially, if the main purpose is to secure the long-term future of the club, was there to look at other elements of leisure and recreation that would support and bolster the activities and financial position of the club long-term? And my second brief question, if I can go ahead, Provost, is in 12.2.1 in the report, there is a very clear statement of refusal. Can I ask Craigie Golf Club, did you not receive a clear steer from the planning team that actually proposals along the line that you've brought forward would be very would not have a high chance of success, and there's this obviously this view of trying to fail fast so that ultimately you don't hemorrhage money on a solution that might not come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the first element, yes, as a golf club, I've been involved for the last 10, 12 years with regards to the finances of the club and the options and what we were looking at. So we looked at altered membership, we looked at reducing the fees, we looked at increasing the fees, we looked at going primarily just a 9-hole golf course and leaving the bottom of the course. Obviously, you have the same maintenance staff, you have the same people there. It didn't result in any commercial gain. We approached Live Active, we approached the R&A, we asked for assistance there was none forthcoming. And when we looked at the opportunities, I know one of the councillors mentioned wind and solar. I, as part of Kilmag, have been trying to put windmills in Perthshire for 20 years and haven't succeeded yet, so Aviva outdid me there. So we looked at these options and opportunities, and then when we came back to the requirement for the development, we needed to refacilitate the course. It wasn't just as simple as getting £50,000 to put into the coffers. We required sufficient funds to regenerate the clubhouse, to reproportion the course, to allow some safety net, to allow the club to transition from that 18 to 9. And that is where we arrived at the housing need. We've been looking at this for 10 to 15 years. You know, as the guys mentioned, Jeff Brown was originally looking at moving us out to Tippermore way back in 2005. So this is something that we've been looking at, and this is something that I'm proud of, the solution that we've brought. You know, does it impact on the green belt? Yes, but the green belt is the only asset that the club has. That's the reality of it. And the second part of the question, which I can't actually remember what it was now, I'll hand over to Derek.
Yeah, Yes, your point there with regards, did we ever get any red flags? We attended a meeting, as we said, a pre-app back in 2000, and well, that was 2005 years ago. Sorry, 2000, and all department representatives were there from the council, and they gave us a roadmap. And that came back on the pre-app response came back and gave us that roadmap in writing. We knew that we had to go above and beyond to deliver the site, and at no time through the process were we told or called into a room to say, no, you're not getting it. So what we wanted to do is, we know there are sites sitting in the LDP at the moment that have not moved, they haven't progressed. We had to show that this site was effective, although it was not in the green belt. We have gone above and beyond, both the technical side, the legal side, the ecology as well. We've been asked for more and more and more through this process, even to the point in May and June we were asked for a full bat survey over the site. We were asked for biodiversity improvement plans, which would come at stage 2. So I could go into a lot of detail, but we wanted to get to the point, even on the transport assessment. We wanted to come here today with no argument over the TA. We were not asked to undertake that report. We've got information to show we weren't. So, but we were more than willing to do that work, to undertake the ecology work and come back at the end of October. But I know that we wanted to deal with this today. And these 2 items can be dealt with by condition. So in terms of flooding as well, we've spent years on that. We've undertaken the consultation. We've undertaken all of the studies on that as well. We come back to Queen's Avenue. We have a solution for Queen's Avenue that can be delivered. We get to that point, and if we take out these technical aspects, we are talking about, yes, housing land, and we're talking about Greenbelt and the LDP. If this site was in the LDP, would it be delivered? Would it be consented? Because we have shown we have the technical solution to deliver it, and once we get to detailed application stage, we can do that. And I won't go into all the benefits that come from that, but so your question is, no, we were not told to stop the bus. And we have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on this project.
Thank you. Councillor McCall next, please.
Thank you, Provost. And thank you, both sets of deputations. My question is for the applicant, probably Derek, I think, about the secondary access road. Not clear which side of Woodside or which end of Woodside the secondary access road is proposed for. And is that intended to be open all the time as a full-time access road? Thank you.
That's consulted with transportation. It is only for emergency vehicles only at times of if there is a flood event, and it is for yes, emergency services only.
Which end of Woodside Crescent are we talking about here?
Is basically up at the top of Woodside Crescent, and basically we will access in through the current garages, the council garages that are there, and that will be brought up to adoptable standard, and any access will come into the low side of the course.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Drysdale, you have a point of clarification.
Thank you, Provost. Sorry, I was a bit slow in the button coming. It's in relation to the previous answer given. Can I just seek clarification? Whilst officers could not give a determination on the site, did officers make it clear that it was contrary to policy? Because that's, as I understand it, the limit of what they're able to do.
Yes, Councillor Drysdale, they did identify it was contrary. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chan next, please.
Thank you, Provost. My question is to the applicant. I suppose my question is, if your application is not successful, how long does Craigiehill Golf Club left have to trade? And after you cease trading, how long? What happens to the existing land and the clubhouse and Bucky Braes and the surrounding areas? Thank you.
I would say that if this is refused, we've probably got the and continues to be refused, we've probably got about another 15 months to run the absolute maximum. absolute maximum. At that point, we'll be running through the process of offloading the existing assets that we do have at the club, land, any other assets that we have at our disposal, the clubhouse. At that point, it will either go revert under conditions of the initial allocation of land to the landowner, but that's conditioned on what bids we get to clear our existing debt for the sale of that asset. If they match it, it goes back to the landowner. If it goes to the highest bidder, then that land will simply sit fallow. It'll be like the old pitch and putt course. So it will basically just be left to go wild until such times as whoever purchases it decides what they're going to do with the asset that they've purchased. So make no mistake, we will be gone. I would say that, just to finish in that final point, that the highest bidder may not necessarily have the best interests of the community at heart that we believe we do, absolutely do believe we have. And I can at least elicit the invitation to tender process that we went through initially, where Kilmac were supporting us as technical advisor through it. And it became very clear while we did that, and I closed out that process, that those that were bidding for that property had absolutely no thought either A, about the club, or B, about the wider community. It was going to be predicated on pure profit. That's what you may get if this is turned down. Now, again, it's in your gift to either accept it. Any plans they may have, that is in your gift. But I don't think you'll find anyone that's going to have a more sympathetic view and approach to what we are trying to achieve here, to keep this leisure facility that exists now, to grow it and develop it in the future.
Councillor Waters next.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to both the groups of deputations. This is for the applicants. The NPF4 and LDP2 very clearly set aside strict criteria over developing on greenbelt land. Just an open question is to say, why do you feel this proposal justifies going against that strict criteria?
I think just to reinforce what the club captain said there, Craigie Hill Golf Club only have one asset, and it's the land. If we could have built somewhere else or managed to acquire funds elsewhere, then we would have done it. We've been trying that for the last 10 years. Basically, we have one option, which is to utilise the land or a third of the land to benefit the other 2/3 of it. So, you know, if we have to amputate an arm to save the body, then that's what we'll do, and that's what we basically had to decide. But whilst we're doing that, we've reinforced the product and enhanced what we give to the community with which we are within. There is no option, but our land is within Greenbelt. That there isn't another option. We've explained why commercially we couldn't wait for the LDP. We were actually asked by the head of the planning to enter into the next application, next tranche of the LDP, which I find surprising, where the statement is that we would have probably been refused because we're in Greenbelt anyway. I don't know why the head of the planning would ask me to enter into another format and another 5-10 year structure. But the truth of the matter is, no, we only have one asset, and it is on the Greenbelt.
When collectively as a club as well, we just looked at, probably positive planning, and we looked at every site should be considered under its own merits. And that is why we're here today. NPF4 has to be holistic. It can't cherry pick. So again, under the guidance there, but we're looking to look at the end game rather than the, you know, let's refuse it because there is a current outdated plan that states that, yeah, they're not going to support it, and there is that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watt next, please.
Thanks, Provost. My question is to Mr. McConaughey. It seems that the biggest concern locally is flooding. It was a statement Mr. McConaughey made that planned development on the Glasgow Road has actually increased the frequency of flooding in 2022, 23 and 25, which was a little concerning to me. But would it be fair to say that with the mitigations being put in place in this development, is that it is at worst neutral impact on the current flooding?
Well, that's the whole idea of putting in SUDs. If the SUDs are, as I said, if they're designed properly and constructed properly and maintained, then they should end up with a neutral impact. But that's just the surface water. There's also the issue of the foul water as well, where the current Scottish Water sewer, certainly at Cherry Bank, no longer has capacity. We've already got additional tanks that have been put in there, which I believe was put in for the Persimmon development. They've been seen to surcharge several times a year. So this application would require to put in a tank as well, which would hold back the foul water during storm periods. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett next, please.
Thank you, Provost. My question is a follow-up to the question from Councillor McCall about the top of Woodside Crescent. Can you just please explain how the Queen's Avenue culvert improvement is going to resolve the flooding, as you're saying, because it only improves the flow of the burn below Queen's Avenue. And the area at the top of Woodside Crescent is also liable to flooding, as we saw from a video that was circulated by Perth Community Flooded and also photographs. So I don't see how that's going to work. If you could explain how that addresses the flooding, that's first part. And the second part is that you said in your response that this access from the top of Woodside Crescent would only be for emergency vehicles. But I think it says somewhere in your plans that it's also to provide non-vehicular access all the time. So how are you going to stop people just going up and down what is quite a narrow cul-de-sac street with houses on either side of it and parking on either side at the moment? Thanks.
I think with regards to the first solution at Queen's Court, the idea is to, and Malcolm can correct me here, but the idea is to widen the culvert at the Queen's Court access to allow the water down. Basically, that is like opening the end of a bottle. It throttles and allows the water above it down. It doesn't protect the water below it. So the water at the moment is held at the culvert at Queen's Court. It backs up, and that's what floods the road. When they increase the size of that culvert, that's what will reduce the water flow above it. So that would, without seeing it, obviously the design is, we haven't seen the design, but that is the principles, I believe, of the design. I'll let Derek answer the question regarding Queen's Court.
Hi, Councillor Barrett. Yes, the runoff that you saw in the videos, which that is the surface water runoff which comes off of the course. So that's your surface water, that's your greenfield runoff. With the installation of the suds ponds and the ponds that we'll be putting into the site, that will not happen anymore. That will be contained on site. And as for the accessibility, that access has formed part of the transportation connectivity plan, and that is for pedestrians, that is for cyclists. So that is for families who want to get to the schools, that's to go onto Woodside Crescent. So it's not for cars, it is going to be bollarded. It will have a solution there that is only for pedestrians and for cyclists.
I can see some management issues there if there are bollards that need to be removed in an emergency. But just to go back to the point about Queen's Avenue and the culvert, the design of the culvert is available, and what the culvert's meant to do is available in the Craigie flood scheme plans. It will clear water from Queen's Avenue, but it doesn't affect what's going to be happening further up. It's not a continual flow of water that goes down the hill and into where the problems are at Queen's Avenue during times of flood.
As I say, sorry, just to answer on that, as you come up the hill, you come out of the water. So we're talking about crossing the flood area that is shown on the flood plans, which will assist.
Councillor Duff.
Thank you. My question's for the applicants, and it was really just a follow-up to Mr McConaughey's comment there about insufficient capacity for foul water treatment in terms of your plans. And I wonder if you could tell us what your view on that is, please.
Yeah, as part of the development, we have undertaken a drainage impact assessment with Scottish Water. They have undertaken a network analysis as well. So there is capacity sleepless inch for the site. But what they have stated is, in terms of the network and in terms of times of flood, they are looking for an element of storage from the site. They gave us 6 locations that have been identified. And as Malcolm has quoted, that would either be through a pipe system for storage, or indeed it would be a tank system. That would be followed up as part of a detailed application and full technical sewers application. But at this stage, we have no objection from Scottish Water, as they have qualified there is location, there is capacity, and there is a solution.
Okay. I had said Councillor Duff was going to be the last question. Councillor Lane put it in the. You're okay. Thank you. Right. Thank you to the deputy. Sorry. I think you got at least 4 questions earlier, Councillor Allen. If a very, very, very quick one and a very concise answer from whoever's answering.
Thank you. The question is to the applicants. It's been mentioned a couple of times about the traffic assessment. In our papers, it suggests that despite being requested, we didn't get one. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Very, very quickly, we were not asked to undertake the traffic assessment on the site at the supermarket site at Aldi. The site at the time obviously went through judicial review, was quashed, came out, and was a zone site. But at no times in any correspondence were we asked to do that. We would have, because it's insignificant in the overall picture. We were asked to undertake traffic movements in July from the golf course, which we ran some further calculations and submitted, but we're not in July asked for any further work to be done on Aldi. We have, as I say, run some initial modelling now, and that is showing that there is a non-significant impact on the junction, and it will move freely. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes questionings of deputies. Thank you to both deputation parties for your speaking at council this morning and for your answering of questions. There is now going to be a 10-minute comfort break for everyone until 11:30. Welcome back, members, to the second part of the Predetermination Committee. First questions for officers are from Councillor Eric Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. We've taken in a lot of information this morning, so my question to Mr Smith is to try and focus on the key issues as I see them, certainly. So can I ask Mr Smith, just to clarify again in your own words, answers to the following questions. Is there currently adequate allocated land for housing in and around Perth City? Is this proposal in line with the local development plan and/or national planning framework 4? And if not, how significant a departure would approval of this proposal be? And finally, what could the potential consequences be of a significant policy departure be if this application were to be approved? Thank you.
Thank you. 4 separate and very weighty questions there, and I might have to come back to you just to remind me of each of them. I think the first one related to what is the land supply picture within Perth and Kinross, and I think at the minute my understanding is we have over 11,500 units identified in the housing land supply, which creates and equates to an already allocated 10-year pipeline supply, well beyond what we are required to have in hand, and that's reflective of the strategic planned approach that's been taken within the LDP2 to see areas where we are expanding Perth and various other areas across Perth and Kinross in a strategically thought out way to ensure maximum deliverability of economic prosperity and success for our council area. But approval here potentially could undermine the viability and thus the deliverability of that strategically planned supply, and in turn potentially undermining the many businesses who have planned in a strategic way and promoted these sites in partnership with the council. So that impact relates both to the affordable and general market supply of housing, both within Perth and across the region, in a potentially adverse way, rather than just focusing on an individual planning application and the implications that it might have in a very constrained sense. So that was your first point. Can you remind me again what your second point was, please?
Surely. It was just simply, can you confirm whether the proposal before us today is or is not in line with local development plan and/or national planning framework 4? And if not, how significant a departure would approval of this proposal be?
Yeah, I think the report makes it clear that the proposals are not seen by officers to be in compliance with either the Local Development Plan 2 or NPF 4, or indeed the general tenets of how proper planning process and decision making would take place, that there are no significant strategic or overwhelming reasons to see a departure from that plan and this sort of development in the green belt. The significance of that is, as I sort of touched on in the previous answer, that we're here today because the scale of the departure from what's set out in the development plan is significant and would have far-reaching implications, both directly and potentially indirectly through precedent for similar type proposals for departures of development in the green belt occurring, and that could have significant impacts on other interests, not only in the councils but other businesses, etc., and the deliverability and viability of housing within a wider area. It's because they have taken into account what they expect to happen, what has been set out as to will happen, what policies, guidance and other documentation says, and this is coming out of left field to an extent and not something that they would ever thought would be in competition for them and potentially could undermine their positions.
Okay, thank you. I think you've answered all my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. We now go to Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. I'll ask one and then open up for that. I'll come back later on, if I may. It's a question really for Mr. Smith and Mr. Fogg, perhaps to answer this one. And we mentioned on it, and it's following a little bit from Councillor Drysdale, this concept of precedent that we talk about. It's mentioned in the paper. We're judging this case, it's really perhaps for all of us here and for the public, like all planning applications, we're judging this case, whether it goes yes or no at the end, based on the information we have here before us. So theoretically, like all applications, there isn't a precedent set because it's based purely on one case. but obviously in reality there is. I wonder if you could just expand on this concept of precedent, because if we're judging a case purely on what's in front of us, that's pretty much unique. Does it really set a precedent, or doesn't it? It seems to be a vague area. I know in planning we often say there's no precedent set, but this hazy area. If you could explain that for a bit more, perhaps more for public.
Councillor Brown, if it helps, there is a tension because members are regularly advised that each application should be considered on its own merits, and that is true. But also, it's not wrong to have regard to the ramifications of an approval or a refusal of a particular case and what that might indicate to the wider world. In this instance, the advice from officers is that this proposal should be regarded as a significant departure from the development plan, primarily because it's countenancing development within the Greenbelt, where none of the limited exceptions in NPF 4 or LDP 2 can be met. And there is a risk there that if this council gives out a signal that actually Greenbelt isn't as significant or worthy of protection as one might have supposed, that other developers will say, well, I will come forward too. So there are wider ramifications than this site alone, and it is legitimate to ask oneself, what would approval of this, when on the face of it there isn't a policy justification for it, mean for the wider Perth Kinross, and what confidence and what confidence would we have then in the development plan going forward?
Yeah, and sorry, I'd maybe just quickly add to that what we're talking about here is precedent of principle. So the principle of developing within the green belt when there is no accepted or clear justification for doing so when measured against the relevant tests associated with decision making on this sort of thing.
Come back to the next question. Thank you. Actually, it's leading on from that, because there's a point I queried with the applicant. The principle of the percentage of land being used then doesn't apply here. They were talking about approximately a third of the land was to be developed as on the greenbelt. That is greenbelt is greenbelt. There's no numbers involved in policy at all on that. Is that correct?
No, and I think it's hopefully relatively clear that the issue here is developing housing in an unplanned manner in a greenbelt location. I think we've also made it clear in our report and all the discussions that we've had over many years that we have no issue with the club wishing to alter its offering, and we could work with them on that. But the way of achieving that and the level of housing proposed is way beyond what we could ever consider as being appropriate.
And the last question, again, following the same suit on this, if there was a clearly defined need for housing, and it was mentioned that some of the areas which we already have in the LDP2 are not being developed, but they're just still left. If there was a clear defined need that came forward, would that be more considered for Greenbelt?
I find that difficult to answer. We place close attention to the rate at which sites are developed and the available land supply. And as matters currently stand, there is an ample sufficiency of residential development land available. We can't control the rate at which it comes forward, but it's not usual to say, well, we've got, as we do at the moment, some 11,000 plus sites available within that Perth housing market area, so we'll allow some more in the green belt because these haven't come forward. That's to some extent a commercial decision, but you don't normally say, well, we'll add to it. The reality is we have an exceptionally high supply given the stage that LDP2 is at, and there'll be additional provision coming forward through LDP3 as well.
Thank you. Bailey McLaren next.
Provost, thank you. I think I'm thinking this question maybe has partially been answered. Mr. Smith made a comment at the beginning when he introduced the paper about exceptional circumstances. is it possible to have a bit more clarity around what then would become exceptional circumstances to be deviating from the use of the green belt or bringing forward green belt for development and or deviating from policies? Thank you.
I think that's despite what you might think, a very easy question to ask and not quite so easy to answer. But I think what I would maybe reflect on here is that if there was a situation where much needed housing was not being delivered, which isn't the case, you know, we are delivering large amounts of housing, and we have plans in place and sites identified and people progressing sites to deliver a huge amount of housing to meet the needs of Perth and Kinross and Perth in general. So if that was not the case, which it isn't, then that might be a circumstance where we would have to show that we were delivering our 5-year supply. But as I've indicated, we have an in excess of 10 years of supply. So that sort of scenario might see a reasoning to go, look, we are not delivering. We don't have sites allocated, but we do. The other factor that I've touched on as well is if there would be overwhelming positive economic impacts for the councillor area, Perth or the region. Again, the question here is that whilst there might be positive impacts in terms of the viability of the operation of the golf offering at Craigie, that delivering that in an unplanned and unexpected way in relation to the development plan could see other projects adversely impacted. So our view is that the overall impact of this would be negative in both economic and housing delivery terms.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Provost. I've got 2 quick questions, if that's okay. My last question to the applicant was about the traffic assessment and the fact in the paperwork suggests that it was requested but not supplied. But the applicant is suggesting that it wasn't actually requested. Can we get some clarification on that, please?
Yeah, I think I did cover that in my presentation, that, you know, the standard methodology and agreed methodology was that site should be included. The applicant chose not to include it because the planning permission had not at that point been issued, but it's always been our position that that site should be given a value and be included within the TA. It was made clear they decided not to include it. It's a matter of detail. We weren't going to go back and forth dealing with that. The principle here is that this is a greenbelt site, not allocated for any development, could have under significant impacts on other things, and we're not of a view that we need to bottom that issue out at this point in time because it's a secondary matter.
Just to come back on that one, if that's okay, yeah. In the paperwork, it suggests that it was requested. In your response there, you're suggesting it wasn't requested. What was the situation?
No, as I said, the site was requested to be included and the applicant chose not to.
Second question is, you made a mention there, which I perhaps picked up wrongly, but you suggested that the number of homes at 175 was too many. The deputation suggested that they had no red flags throughout their application process. Is there a suggestion that less homes in the application might have been acceptable?
No, I think, again, I would say that the position of officers has remained constant and that the principle would not be able to be supported as being made clear and highlighted over many, many years. But the situation is that we have advised if the club were insistent on pursuing the housing proposals that they have, then it would be for them to create a case, but officers couldn't see how a case could be made. And that is a situation that has come to pass in terms of our position, which has been consistent throughout. Again, there was also comment in relation to advice from the former strategic lead, and that was to enter the local development plan call for sites process. But again, that in a response to the insistence of the club to progress. but I would just say that that was a comment on the process that they would require to follow, but the likelihood also being that this would be unsuccessful, if that answers your questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Colin Stewart next, please.
Thanks, Provost. In the report at section 10, there's a table of additional statements, and it says the third one down is that an appropriate assessment under habitats regulations was not required. I was just wondering why that was.
There are specific tests within those regulations that set out when an appropriate assessment would be required, and those were not triggered.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. I have two questions, if I may. One's a follow-on to Councillor Drysdale and to Councillor McLaren's questions about what's significant. You've mentioned that several times. So I'm curious to know why you use that description if it doesn't make any difference, if it's not quantifiable. So can that be quantified in any way? My second question really is around the assertion that there's sufficient land for housing. There isn't sufficient land for housing in the city where people actually want to live. And so I'm just wondering how that has become an issue here. I should also say that this is in my ward, and I'm very familiar with the needs of the local people and, and housing and where they want to live. People don't want to necessarily move out of their communities, so I'm not quite sure how that argument stacks up. Thank you.
I'd probably say that the Local Development Plan 2 identifies the housing requirements and sites identified, and that was agreed unanimously by the council following its adoption. We also have a current process ongoing where there was a call for sites called in relation to proposals that people would like us to consider in terms of the preparation of LDP 3, and I am aware that Craigie Hill Golf Club has not submitted this site to that. So I accept that you have an opinion, but the Local Development Plan 2 sets out, as does the strategic housing requirements, again approved by the council, as to what the data, information and position of the council is, and that differs somewhat.
And my first question about how can you quantify significant, because I don't think that was made clear.
Again, it's not a quantifiable issue because there are thousands and thousands of variables that could impact what would be considered as significant in thousands and thousands of different types of projects. All I would say is that the officers that are making these judgments are professionally qualified members of the Royal Town Planning Institute and with many, many, many years of experience in that field. And I think if you asked anyone with the appropriate experience and qualification, that there would be no doubt that this was a significant departure from the development plan.
I would just like to make a comment here, if I may. We're not architects, we're not planners. We need to understand what you mean by the
It's not allowed comments at this stage. Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Provost. I've got a policy question. My understanding is that the Green Belt policy is policy 43. I understand under policy 43 there are exceptions, and policy 43A basically says that development will be permitted where it can be demonstrated that the development supports an established use. I'm just wondering why that hasn't been applied in this case.
It's not that it's not been used in this case. I think what we're looking at there is matters such as farm diversification or the expansion of an existing established use in the countryside to diversify itself. Those are policy premises that we've used, for example, in relation to Murray's Hall or many farming operations to expand their offering. What we're talking about here is and again, if you recall back to Murray's Hall, for example, initially there were significant housing proposals proposed there, and they were required to be removed, and uses and complementary activities associated to the hotel offering required to be incorporated. So I think, as I said earlier, we'd be happy to support the club in terms of diversifying its golf-related offering, but unfortunately we can't support the housing proposals set out in their scheme.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tom Kieran.
Thank you, Provost. I suppose my question stemmed around officers' answers to Councillor Drysdale and similar to Councillor McCall. You know, as housing convener, I sit in meetings with officers talking about housing supply, what we're doing, what we do within our own ship, where we have 39% overcapacity in the system deliberately because we don't know what's coming forward. Who knows what it is. I'm aware that the LDP2 was drafted and passed 15-16, and I think we voted on it in 2017, if my memory suggests. That's an awfully long time ago in the housing system. There are councils who have proposed a housing emergency. There is a country that's proposed a housing emergency. So I don't understand how guaranteed housing coming forward, some of it affordable and accessible, isn't an acceptable divergence from what we set down in an LTP nearly 10 years ago. Still doesn't mean that this isn't an acceptable, what is an outline planning permission, not an actual planning permission. So nothing gets built on the back of what we actually decide today. So I'm not understanding this sort of, there's plenty of housing out there. We've no control over what's coming forward. There's over provision, there's always over provision. And we're in a moving situation. So I don't see the cognizance of applying a rule that was 8-10 years ago to today, when we have real demand on housing, we have real demand on poverty, which is related to housing. You know, the affordable housing here will get people out of poverty. And we're being asked to ignore that because the rules set a while back don't let us do that. And I'm having difficulty with that when I spend the whole time as a housing convener trying to battle that.
I think maybe just to comment on some of the things you said there, we're applying the rules of today, not the rules of 8 years ago. Yes, the local development plan was begun to be produced and then adopted a number of years ago, but the principles remain the same. I'll perhaps bring in my colleague Nicola Swarsky, who is the Place Strategies Manager, to answer some of the more detailed questions that you've got, and maybe there can be some further back and forth in relation to that. But I'd maybe reflect back to some of the previous responses that I've issued, that the delivery of housing and the way that that should be strategically planned, identified, and in partnership with various parties has been worked through in detail over many years through LDP2, through the SHIP, etc. And an unplanned, unexpected, and perhaps unnecessary scale of housing such as this could undermine the delivery of a significant number of other schemes, accounting for a number of units way beyond what we're talking about here, and could have that impact that those units are not delivered, affecting the amount of affordable housing that is delivered across Perth and beyond, and particularly the amount of affordable units. So this could be seen as undermining what has been planned for quite a considerable amount of time. But I'll maybe let Nicola join in, who's online, if she has any further comments, and Jeff might have a further comment as well.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate, the Greenbelt is a current policy, and LDP2, whilst was created before MPF4, is still very much in line with the principles of what MPF4 sets out with regards to Greenbelt. There will be a Greenbelt review. That point is, you know, the point about strategic decision making. That's the way that would be undertaken on Greenbelt, and that will be part of the LDP process. As Mr. Fogg has, you know, already indicated, yes, we're in the latter stages of LDP2, but it's still a current plan. It's still up to date, and it's still delivering against lots of those allocations. The 11,500 figure is the remaining capacity. Some of that will go beyond the plan period, and they're obviously larger sites, but we've got a complete mix of sites. But that's, in terms of Councillor McEwen's point, in terms of that housing emergency and the bringing sites forward, that's what we can do through LDP3. That's the assessment of sites, call for sites, which has just closed. We've got around 260 sites to assess, and we can look and bring those forward. That will be based on a housing needs assessment that we're doing at the minute as well, which is all part and parcel of that. In terms of the comment about the SHIP, SHIP's still to be signed off when we go into housing committee, but yes, we're looking at an over provision on that, which is, clearly an extremely positive position to be in, that we'll be able to deliver against the money that we receive from the Scottish Government, and hopefully deliver beyond that as well. But that is very much related to affordable housing, and the proportion that comes forward on those sites. So, as has already been alluded to, generally that would be around 25% on those sites. The capacity that we're talking about in terms of that 11,500 is across all sites that could come forward, so both open and market housing. And clearly that the housing emergency, we talk about affordable housing, but it's also about that ability to have move on indication as well, move on accommodation as well. And just to reiterate the point that has been made, there is no indication that we're not delivering against our figures, and that's what the monitoring does, and that is what LDP3 will pick up on. If there's sites that aren't delivering, they can be removed. We can put new sites in and take that forward. Thank you.
The only further comment I was going to make, partially to answer Councillor McCall's concerns and your own, Councillor McEwen, is that yes, the planning system does allow and recognise the role of unallocated sites, windfall sites coming forward, but they have to be assessed on their own merits. This is proposing development within the green belt, and you referred to the vintage, if you like, of LDP2. This contravenes NPF4, which was the Scottish Government's policy, and that was only published in February of 2023. So it's very much being judged against current policy. If this was brownfield, then there's strong support for that, even though it's not allocated. But it's because of its green, it's breaching the green belt policy that you're finding the officers saying they cannot support it, notwithstanding the real concerns that are recognised about the need for housing and the SHIP.
So I suppose one little question that comes out of this is that we talk about there's enough provision in LDP2 and applying it now, and this will be too much. But the LDP3 is coming forward with more provision, but that won't be too much, and that won't impinge on. And actually, does our current system actually have enough houses in it at all? And I suppose that's an opinion of mine rather than a factual thing related to this, but
it's not that it's too much, it's where it is. That there's not a justification that can be convincingly advanced for breaching the Greenbelt policy of this council. When you look at the supply that is available, the more provision that's going to come forward through LTP3, that the case isn't being made out. I'm not saying that these houses wouldn't be sold. Yes, they would be sold. I'm not saying that there are people looking to buy. Yes, there are. But that of itself is thought by officers not to justify where it's being proposed in this application.
Deputy Provost.
Thank you very much. I think my question follows on from Bailey McLaren asking about exceptional circumstances. We're talking a lot about the green belt, and we're taking the green belt as a given. What are the factors and criteria that determine that this particular site should be part of the green belt? Can that be elucidated briefly? Thank you.
I think what you're saying there is, what is the purpose of a green belt? Yes.
If I may, I think I understand the purpose of the green belt, but what is the what the criteria, the factors for the inclusion of this piece of land in the green belt? Thank you.
Again, that would reflect back to the purposes of Greenbelt, which is to create clear landscape settings to cities, to give them clear boundaries and defined areas where development should be concentrated, to allow opportunities for people to enjoy the outdoors, etc., etc. But to protect important areas in and around cities for people to enjoy the outdoor spaces, but also make it clear as to where development should be directed. And that is not to greenbelt areas unless there are exceptional circumstances, and that's not considered to be the case here. The identification of the greenbelt has been tested, reviewed, and confirmed through various local development plan processes, and again agreed unanimously by the council.
Okay, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Provost. We've heard a lot of discussion there recently about housing numbers and housing need, and I think my question is a kind of follow-on from Councillor McCall and Councillor McEwen. And I wanted to ask more specifically about affordable housing numbers in terms of our overall housing need within that part of the city. For instance, we recently wanted to build 150 affordable houses at Glover Street site, but a decision to largely reverse that decision following the decision to sell land to Capability Scotland there. So what my question is would the delivery of 77 affordable houses in this area of the city be regarded as a significant contribution to affordable housing in the area?
I think probably, and I will bring in Nicola in a second to go into a bit more detail, but what I would say here is that approving an unplanned housing development such as this in the Greenbelt could have significant impacts on the delivery of other housing sites, including significant amounts of affordable housing elsewhere where businesses have planned, considered and invested in a system which has told them what will happen. And suddenly they're being faced with something that they had assumed and presumed quite rightly would not be happening, that would have an adverse impact on their business and planning and investments to date. But as I say, I'll maybe defer to Nicola in terms of some more information in terms of what the situation is in this particular part of the city.
Thank you. In terms of the overall number that we've been talking about, this 11,500, in terms of exactly what will come forward as affordable housing, we don't know. But I guess if you could assume that 25% of that came forward, then you're looking at almost 3,000 affordable units. And that is that everything is delivered, and if 25% affordable comes forward. So that's a top line figure. Obviously, it's already been referred to in terms of the SHIP, so the Strategic Housing Improvement Programme, and that sets out year on year what is likely to come forward, and equally in terms of the monies available to support that. So the question is, I think it was said that 77, but I think it's actually 44 affordable units that would come forward on this site at 25%, because the accessible is a different figure. So I think it's 44. Is that significant? Well, it's not significant in that it would be delivering what it should be delivering. It's not over and above anything. It's 20. If it came forward, it would be 25%, and that's what we would expect off any site. So in my opinion, no, that's not significant. And because of everything else that's been said, and I won't repeat that, plan-led system, allocations, expectations of affordable housing coming forward, then no, in itself, it's not enough reason to overweigh the Greenbelt issue.
So just to come back, I think you're right, 25% is 44, but I think in terms of the submission that we had from the applicants today, they were going to increase that to, was it 44 or 45%? I forget the actual figure, which was equivalent of 77, I think.
I think that figure was including accessible as well as affordable. They're not the same thing. Okay, Councillor James next, please.
Thanks very much, Provost. Most of my questions have actually been asked already. Councillor McEwen is along the same lines as myself. My question is, the difficulty is the green belt, and our officers have already said that they're quite happy to work with the club to come up with something different. Maybe this has happened quite well, as I understand, down at Murray's Hall, where they wanted housing on a green belt, and we worked with them. As this is an in principle application, is there something we can do to work with the club to come up with something which is achievable, and would it make a difference if this area was to be included in LDP 3? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I'll take that one for you. So yes, you were correct to reference Murray's Hall there as a good example. That was one that came to the Planning and Placemaking Committee with housing in the Greenbelt. We weren't supportive of that, so we worked with the developer to come up with an alternative scheme that was ultimately supportable. We would be absolutely willing to work with Craigie Hill Golf Club and its members to come up with a scheme which we could support, and we'd be willing to do that through the pre-application engagement process. So I'd stress that to all the members of the audience today, that we would be willing. There's definitely scope on this site for the diversification of the club, just not housing within the Greenbelt.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Provost. Would it be reasonable to suggest that that area of land of Craigie Hill Golf Club was designated green space to safeguard the golf club, and ultimately that status is now going to see the demise of the golf club?
I think what I would say, it's Greenbelt. It has a leisure activity within it, but it wasn't identified as part of the Greenbelt to safeguard the golf club, no.
Okay, Councillor Welch.
Thank you, Provost. The North Inch golf course was suffering significantly reduced membership, financial struggles a number of years ago, but is now operating very successfully. I'm just trying to think of a set of circumstances where the North Inch would have come forward and actually requested housing on the North Inch, because I think from an allocation perspective, it is a Greenbelt area too. So, you know, is this a similar scenario that we're talking about here? So for example, does it start to drive a horse and cart through, for example, the many golf courses in Perthshire and Perth and Kinross that could be potentially facing problems, but using this as a potentially, if it's given permission for housing, could then essentially create a precedent for similar approaches? Thank you.
Yes.
Leader of the Council.
Thanks, Provost. My concern is that we have got the call out for sites for LDP3, and everybody will be putting sites forward. Business transactions will take place under the known rules of engagement. We here are being asked to possibly undermine the confidence of other developers that want to come at Perth and Kinross if we are going to go against a policy such as this to enable houses to possibly be provided at a different price range. Is this a possibility? My question is that a decision here to move ahead with this proposal could undermine confidence of other house builders moving into Perth.
Yes, I think that's a very strong issue and concern that we have. What I'd maybe also say is, without making a judgment on what may or may not happen should this site have been promoted in the call for sites, which I understand it hasn't, is that it may be found not to be a suitable site when assessed against the various criteria and in competition with 260 other sites.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Provost. In relation to the green belt, which my view is the really big issues sitting in here. You've mentioned Murray's Hall a couple of times, where there's been a lot of effort going in to protect that idea and the principle of a green belt throughout Perth. I just want to ask the question: has there been any other applications outside that, or any successful applications outside that within the green belt that have successfully, from the applicant's perspective, went through a planning application and been approved, or has the integrity of the green belt survived the LDP2 implementation?
I would say that my memory has not caught up with any proposals which we have supported, which have been significant departures from the development plan and the relevant policies in relation to Greenbelt. Rather, similar to what we spoke about in relation to Murray's Hall, that was negotiated or discussed and agreed to the sense that it met with the terms of the various policy considerations, whether that be within LDP2 or NPF4. Members might also recall the proposals at Confons, West Confons, again, where elements that there was tension with the development plan were discussed, negotiated and removed, such that we had a proposal that could be supported as compliant with the development plan and not a significant departure. So in answer to your question, no, I'm not aware of any projects where they've been considered a significant departure and they have been supported.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks very much. There's been quite a lot of discussion about the potential impact this will have on other developers who've got sites allocated in Perth and Kinross. Have any of those developers made a formal objection to this proposal?
No, and I'll maybe again get Jeff to come in. That is not something that we would anticipate anyway, until such time as the council made a determination on the application, and there is the risk that if a decision was taken on this, that there would be a challenge made in relation to that.
I thought someone else was going to, or Jeff was going to say something.
Only that it's not practice for other developers to make representations into unrelated sites unless there's particular interest. So no, they haven't, but that's not of itself surprising.
But that doesn't mean the option wasn't available to them. I think Tesco's objected to Aldi's site, if I remember rightly, and there's a list of objection comments in the paper that we've got in front of us, so clearly objections are coming in. I don't understand why we would logically exclude other developers from that.
I can only say what my experiences is, and that is in commercial retailing, a keen interest is taken by other developers, and yeah, you're right, Tesco's are not slow to give us the benefit of their views on competitors coming forward, whereas in contrast, in the house building sector, it's not normal for other developers to make representations, but you're quite right, all parties have the opportunity should they wish to do so.
Yeah, I think maybe just quickly adding to that, apologies, Provost, that what is generally the case, and myself having worked in the house building industry and also in consultancy, is that the general presumption is that decisions will be taken in line with the terms of the development plan. But if that is not the case, then great thought will be given in relation to what action should be taken to protect the interests of your own business and all the money and effort that has been expended to date.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Provost. I just really wanted to follow up really on some of the points, on the questions that have been raised by other members. And given that this is the main reason is a significant policy Greenbelt Policy 43 and Policy 8 of National Planning Framework 4, if there was a desire to follow through, offer an amendment to approve this, am I right in saying there would have to be a robust justification for diverting away from or departing from existing policy?
Yes, Councillor Brown.
Okay, Councillor Duff.
Thank you. Earlier on, we obviously had a lot of discussion around about the flooding issues for this particular site, and during the discussions we heard about the approved local flood defence scheme, and also an offer from the applicant which could potentially advance the delivery of that scheme. If there was a will to give approval in principle to this application, is that something which could be conditioned into the approval?
Again, perhaps similar to what I said to a previous question, it's an easy one to ask, more difficult to answer. I think at the minute what I would say is that the flood scheme that the council is preparing is to deal with existing known issues as far as possible. It is not designed to support the release of greenbelt land for housing purposes. So a lot of investigation would require to be undertaken as to what the possibility of controlling that issue through any grant of planning permission. But what I'd also say is that the flood risk issue and access, etc., is a matter of detail. What we're talking about here is the principle and focusing on the principle of releasing unplanned land from the greenbelt for the purposes of delivering housing when there is a significant supply of housing already planned and in the pipeline.
So, Provost, sorry, I just have a follow-up. Thank you. No, I'm not suggesting that that would be a justification for anything to do with the green belt. I was just looking, not being a member of planning committee, so therefore a bit less familiar with the procedures in relation to this. In relation to the objection in terms of flooding, if there was an offer to advance the delivery of the flood scheme, with the agreement obviously of the applicant, is that something that could be written into a condition? Sort of, you know, in principle, could that actually be conditioned in any approval?
No, and probably what I would say is we're getting ahead of ourselves, or in planning parlance, it's premature to get to that point. What we have is an identified flood risk situation affecting primarily the access routes to and from the site, whether that be the primary or secondary emergency accesses, and that issue is unlikely to be resolved, if ever, for quite a significant amount of time, at least until the flood scheme is completed and in place, and at that time a review of the situation would have to be undertaken. So I think my view would be no, and it would be premature to do so.
Okay, thank you. That concludes questioning of officers as part of predetermination committee. We are now concluding the predetermination committee, and I'm going to ask members to stay in this meeting. If you are online, please just stay in this meeting, do not join a different meeting. And we will now move into full council. And the application will be debated and determined within the full council meeting. Okay. Okay, and that was a short break, but we're now into Perth Kinross full council. So welcome and apologies. Item 1, we still have Bailey Ahern with apologies, and the clerk will update further apologies.
Provost, just to update, that we've been advised by Councillor Clogali that he has now left the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I have a point of order from Councillor John Duff.
And sorry, I was just wondering if Councillor Smith was needed to come back in for this part of the meeting.
We're about to do declarations of interest as item 2. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Any councillors with a declarable interest, please declare it now. Councillor Smith. Councillor Smith, do you wish to redeclare your interest? We're in full council at the moment.
Declare full interest.
Thank you. We will re-record that. Item 3.1 is the minutes of the meeting of Perth Kinross. Oh, sorry, Councillor Donaldson, I'm not seeing that.
Right. Very quickly, just to say, under the item on the Taste Cities Deal programme, declare an interest with regard to Innerpeffray Library, where I'm a governor. Okay.
Thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Are there any other declarations of interest? No. Okay. Item 3.1 is the minute of the meeting of Perth Kinross Council of the 18th of June 2025. Are members happy to approve the minute of that meeting? Thank you. Members, item 4 is the outstanding business statement. Are there any questions on the outstanding business statement? Councillor McCall, I see you waving at me.
Thank you. I'm just a bit confused about something that's complete and also ongoing. If somebody could explain what that means, please.
Mr. Hendry, maybe?
And so, McCall, I assume this is in relation to number 21. I think it's just to reflect that up until now, the information regarding parking has been provided to members, so it's been complete up until now, but there will be ongoing information provided to members. So we've completed it up until now, but I believe that there will be continued ongoing information provided to members.
So does that mean it's a supplementary action that's coming out of that? Or it's standing business? I just think if something's complete, it's complete. And if there's something else falls out of that, then it's a separate.
Yeah, we can amend it to reflect that. Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other questions on the outstanding business statement, so are members happy to note the outstanding business statement and agree to remove completed actions? Thank you. Members, item 5 is the reconfiguration of the existing golf course and clubhouse from 18 holes to 9 holes and a community hub building and associated sports courts and bike trails, walking and cycling paths and car parking area, erection of up to 175 residential dwellings, open and amenity space, landscaping, drainage, upgraded site access and associated works at Craigie Hill Golf Club. I'm reminding members that only those members who attended the predetermination committee prior to this meeting can take part in the consideration of this item, and that to remind members that the opportunity to hear representations that took part in the predetermination committee, which has just concluded. I'm now going to seek a motion. I see I have a motion from Councillor Ian Massey. Councillor Massey, your motion, please. Apologies. They both came in at the same time. I have a motion from Bailey, which is ahead of Councillor Massey in the chat. So Bailey.
Thank you very much, Provost. I will paste the text of the motion to the chat so that it can be checked for competency, obviously, because in this forum we don't have the opportunity to check it prior to time because there will be a concern that we predetermine things. So to voice that motion, I wish to move for approval subject to the following being addressed by manner of conditions. Number 1, transport planning concern about the interaction with the new supermarket. Number 2, access arrangements in case of flooding on local road network. When such conditions are considered alongside the significant wider benefit of this development, including but not limited to the provision of affordable and accessible housing units within the core of Perth City, its conformity with 20-minute neighbourhood policy, and the long-term security of a popular sports club, it is considered by Council that there is sufficient justification and net gain to permit the development contrary to the provisions of the adopted development plan. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hugh Anderson. You're happy to formally second that? Okay, thank you. Okay, I have an amendment now from Councillor Ian Massey.
Thank you, Provost. My amendment is to support the recommendations of the Strategic Lead Economy Development and Planning to refuse the application. In May 2024, the Scottish Parliament declared a housing emergency and moved for a coherent plan to tackle homelessness and temporary accommodation. This is a severe problem and one which is highly relevant to this council. If the problem of homelessness and inadequate accommodation is to be resolved, it will need firm action by central and local government. I am committed to addressing this, and I recognise that this is one of the biggest problems we face as a council. That being said, the answer cannot be development at any cost. The Parliament's declaration referred to the need for a coherent plan. As we all know, in Scotland, we have the development plan for the last 2 years. This has consisted of the National Planning Framework, NPF4, and our own local development plan too. We now have had at least 50 years of development plan-led system in Scotland, and for the last 30 years, the development plan has been the primary consideration in all decision making. Local development plans are adopted after a lengthy and costly process involving wide consultation with many stakeholders. That was the process which led to the current LDP2. There is now an equally long and detailed process well underway, which will lead to the development of LDP3. These are the results of significant effort and great care by officers and members alike. The function of these plans is to both guide appropriate housing development to the right places and to set our appropriate protection for our landscape and natural assets, one such important protection being our Greenbelt policy. We are in a fortunate position of having a good supply of housing within the Greater Perth housing market area. The report refers to the large housing sites at Bertha Park, which can accommodate some 3,000 homes, the majority of which are yet to be built. It refers to the emerging Almond Valley site, which is likely to accommodate some 1,000 homes, and to the Perth West allocation of 2,000 to 3,000 homes. Moving on from the western area of Perth, but still within the Greater Perth housing area, market area, while not referenced in the report, Oudenaarde has consent for 1,600 homes where development is ongoing. This is all development that has been planned for. This means that the impacts of these developments, for example, in terms of the education obligations for the council and its school estates, have also been accurately assessed. If we approve this proposal contrary to our own local development plan and contrary to NPF4, we are at risk of undermining public confidence in a plan-led system. We also risk approving developments which lack the necessary associated infrastructure. Separately, as the report says, this is a proposal fails to meet any of the exemptions for developing in Greenbelt in terms of policies in either NPF4 or LDP2. In terms of LDP2, the spatial strategy for natural and resilient place aims, and I quote, is to protect and enhance the unique attributes that we have to ensure future generations enjoy the same benefits as us. We will fail in that commitment if we allow this a proposal. To approve this proposal would risk sending a message to other developers that they can opt out of the development planning process and simply come forward with ad hoc sites whenever the chance arises. As the report says, the site would also compete with and risk undermining the viability of the allocated housing sites, which have been carefully considered by the council and promoted by landowners or developers, often at considerable costs. It needs to be borne in mind that this proposal is not simply contrary to the development plan, it is only before the full council for determination because it is significantly contrary to the development plan. The Greenbelt policy breaches of NPF 416 and LDP2 policy 43 are the first reasons for the refusal in the report, and I support them. Additionally, the report advises that there has been insufficient information in relation to the projected tree loss and the apparent contravention of NPF 4 policy 6 and LDP policies 40 on forestry, woodland and trees, and that the proposal has failed to meet the crucially important NPF policy 22 flood risk and water management and LDP policy 52 new developments and flooding. These concerns account for the second and third reasons for the refusal in the report, and I support them too. None of the other planning considerations which have been identified by the applicant or their supporters are sufficient, in my view, to justify departure from the development plan. Accordingly, for this reason, I am moving for refusal. I did not come to this decision easily. I have listened carefully to the arguments made and considered the views of those in support and find myself somewhat in agreement with some of the points they have put forward. I've also reflected on the wider implications for our community. I understand that the proposals like this often come with hope and ambition, and I do not dismiss that effort. But my responsibility is to ensure that the development is sustainable, fair, and in line with the principles that we have collectively agreed upon. In this case, I believe that refusing the application is the right decision for the long-term integrity of our planning system. Do I have a seconder?
I've got Councillor Grant Stewart indicating he wants to second.
Provost, welcome to planning. I sit on the planning committee and I've got 10 other colleagues across the chamber, and we've got members that have previously sat on planning. That being said, today I still felt conflicted. In society, we have laws, rules and policies. And today we've heard much about the LDP and the National Planning Framework. These are there for a reason, and they're part of our shared social collective, our cohesion. As we sit right now, LDP3 is being developed. It's been going on for many, many months. And that would be the case for the LDP2, and I'm sure Councillor Forbes could testify to the work that was required to introduce that. We have already approved housing developments in the west of Perth, significant housing. Not forgetting developments already underway and approved in Stanley, Scone, Bridge of Erne, Blairgowrie, Kinross and Crieff, all with an easy bus ride into Perth. Having plans and frameworks allows clarity for future economic developments, but also protects our communities. Stripping everything back, we have heard issues about flooding, business plans, transport links, but stripping it all back, it is all about the green belt today. Provost, with that in mind, I will second Councillor Massey's amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. And I've got a number of comments coming in the chat. I'm going to take a point of clarification from Councillor Forbes, and then I'm going to take a few minutes just for members to read the terms of the motion. Councillor Forbes, you have a point of clarification.
Yeah, very quickly, Provost. I think Councillor Stewart just referenced me in relation to LDP2, and I have no idea why that was, and perhaps you could explain.
I assume it's because you were the convener when it was approved, but I'll let him come and tell us.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you for the question, Councillor Forbes. It was in reference to these plans are not thrown in willy-nilly. There's a lot of development work, and I'm sure that you would recognise the excellent work that goes into developing these plans.
Okay, I'm going to take a few minutes just to allow members time to read the motion, so we'll just have a few minutes recess. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back to full council. I just would like to invite Bailey to agree to amend his motion to delegate to officers authority to draft and impose appropriate planning conditions for an in-principle application of this nature, together with requirement also, if appropriate, with Section 75 agreement. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. I came into the meeting with an open mind, so I had limited time to draft it, but more than happy to include that wording. That was my intention. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And Councillor Anderson, as the seconder, are you happy with that as well? Thank you. Okay, Councillor Peter Barrett with first comment, please.
Thanks, Provost. I'm now no longer certain what the motion is. I don't know if we've got the finalised wording of that, but in terms of the principle of this application, I think that when considering an application such as this we have in front of us today, which represents a significant departure from the local development plan and is contrary to many planning policies as set out in the report, the key questions are how significant is the departure and do the benefits arising from the development outweigh those policy considerations? Are they sufficient to justify going against the officer's recommendations, national planning policy and the policies of this council? And I think that boils down to the question: is the value of the community assets, the community hub, the future of the golf club and the provision of play and sports facilities considered to be a price worth paying for the substantial loss of greenbelt land, the loss of native woodland and habitat and potential flooding impacts? And although this is a very sensitive issue for the golf club, and as we've heard, possibly even an existential one for them, I couldn't find anything in the report which suggests that this is a marginal call or that there is scope through other material considerations of sufficient and significant weight for members to exercise their judgment and come to a different conclusion from the recommendation to refuse. I think that without a shortage of housing development land, it's not possible to justify going the recommendations of the report on those grounds. There is adequate housing land and sites in the Greater Perth housing market area. Build rates are not faster than anticipated, and even if they were, paragraph 11.1.7 states that there is adequate land already allocated in LDP2 to meet the identified needs. And I cannot see any justification for taking 12 hectares out of the green belt. And I think Mr. Ross's assertion that the site could be considered as partly brownfield lacks credibility and doesn't stand up to the slightest scrutiny. I appreciate that the land is the club's only asset, and I think they were on much firmer ground when they were advancing that as the argument why they had to go down this route. However, paragraph 11.1.8 reiterates the importance of plan-led development over ad hoc site-led proposals and the knock-on impacts that they can have on infrastructure and services and development of more favourable sites, favourable identified sites that we've heard in the responses from officers. The crucial parts of the report for me is paragraph 11.1.10, which states that the residential element represents a significant incursion into the greenbelt, the scale and quantum of which is considered would damage the integrity of the greenbelt and adversely affect the setting of the city. Overall, proposed residential development on a substantial area of the Greenbelt does not comply with Greenbelt policies or objectives and is considered significantly contrary to both the local and national planning policy. And Provost, when you read that in conjunction with paragraph 11.1.13, where it clearly states that the application fails to justify the requirement for the development of greenbelt land for substantial residential development, that a proposal for 175 houses is excessive and impacts on the setting of that part of our city, the case for refusal is compelling and has been reinforced by the responses our officers in answer to questions, to detailed questions on the report and questions which contain, frankly, a lot of what-ifery and whataboutery. But the case for refusal is compelling, and I support it with the recommendation of the report to refuse and the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters next.
Thank you, Provost. Just my main issue here is the green belt and protecting its integrity. This application that's come forward is a major significant departure from that green belt policy. I do have to agree, and I know there were some comments that the better way to deal with this would have been through the LDP 3 process. I am not quite sure. There was a few comments made about whether this was registered as part of that process, but certainly it would be a far better way of dealing with it, where they could look at the greenbelt land, see whether that could be the greenbelt, and see if that could be adjusted, and there was some scope within that for this to become a housing site within that process. I do think if this was approved, it would create a concerning precedent in future applications, given that within LDB2, as far as I can see, that the integrity of the greenbelt has been upheld, and I think it's important that is maintained, and any challenges to that should be done through an LDP3 process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor McEwen next.
Thank you very much, Provost. This is a predetermination. This isn't the end of any application, whether it's approved, whether the motion or the amendment is approved today by council. This will still have to go into detailed planning and come back for assessment, and then possibly even have to go via the reporter down to the Scottish Parliament. So there's a lot of hurdles still to go on here, but people still talk about how this will result in what is being proposed going ahead, and I don't see that. I don't currently think that the planning system and the house building is enough. It's nowhere near enough. We wouldn't have emergencies if we were building off houses, if builders were bringing these developments forward enough. Do I think this sets a precedent that will put off nationwide house builders? And 170 houses, only 100 private ones. Is that really going to compete with a national house builder that are building thousands of houses in the Central Belt? I'm sorry, I personally don't get that as an issue. If I stuck to the rules, we'd have bought 80 council buybacks. We're getting to nearly 250 council buybacks in the last couple of years because we've pushed it outside of the rules. We've bought houses in Dunkeld. We've done things outside of the rules. We've done everything we can to get social, affordable, accessible housing to our residents in different situations. This has come to full council, in my view, because it doesn't fit the rules. And sometimes things need to happen that don't fit the rules. Otherwise, why would full council be able to sit and deter on these things? And it wouldn't be a process. The thing would just fail and it wouldn't come to anywhere. But it does come to us. It does come to us to look at the local situation, something that's very specific. Yes, I get this as Greenbelt. Half of it's still going to be a golf course. It's still going to be Greenbelt. And also it's bounded by a massive road infrastructure. Just the same as the Crosstay Link Road is a massive road infrastructure at the north part of our local Perth and Scone area. So I'm not seeing where the issues arise. Now, I think as councillors we are here to I don't want to say think outside the box. We want to think differently. We want to push forward. We want to get the houses that we need. As housing convener, I can't sit and say we need to build houses. We need to do more of this. We need to do more of that, and then sit and actually give up an opportunity. This is only an opportunity. This only gives the proposers a chance to put something more in detail to try and answer some of the very important questions that have been put here about flooding and access and trees. I don't want any of the mature woodland touched or inhabited, and I wouldn't pass any planning application that did that. But that's not what's in front of us. What's in front of us is this proposal, and I don't strongly get the arguments for refusing this. It's just my personal view on this planning issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Allen next.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost. I'd like to make some comments on the basis of having myself been a past golf club captain. Balancing the finances and good stewardship are essential. This proposed development delivers provision of new and enhanced sporting facilities, which is indeed consistent with NPF 4 Policy 8. The provision of housing as part of the scheme supports the retention of an established use at this location and therefore accords also with Part A of LDP 2 Policy 43. And I could go on, this is not a planning meeting today. This may indeed be a departure from LDP 2 and NPF 4. However, this is a flailing and struggling club desperate to find a solution that not only sustains themselves, but also allows for help with our very publicly stated housing emergency. It's not all about Craigie Golf Club. I will support this.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Bailey McLaren next, please.
Thank you, Provost. This application has clearly taken an immense time, thought and money from the applicant, Craigie Hill, who are aspiring to seek a route to create a sustainable future for their club. If officers' recommendations are approved, we have heard that the club is unlikely to continue, which would be sad. However, our decisions do sit around strong policies laid out through NPF4 and our local development plan. And I think I'll just conclude at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Leader.
Thanks, Provost. Not for the first time, Councillor McHugh and I have different views on things, which is all good, and you can get to good decisions. I feel that this is, I've played golf. I enjoy golf. It's just the golf courses don't like me because of my ability to play. But this isn't the focus of this. Is planning to talk today. It's not about rescuing a business or a club. It's about strictly a planning committee meeting, really. And the officers have given all the reasons why I feel we should not drive the cart and horses through something that's important in a few areas and a few policies here, because I'm worried about where the next application. We could be sitting here at predetermination every full council moving forward if we accept this, because more and more people will want to come with significant departures from the local development plan, NPF4 and Greenbelt infractions. So I will be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. As I think I mentioned earlier on, Craigie Hill Golf Club is in my ward, and indeed has been the venue for many happy family events, and so I'm quite partially minded towards its retention as a community asset for the area. But while I'm very supportive of that notion of retaining it as a community asset, I've learned a couple of things today that has perhaps persuaded me otherwise. I'm disappointed to learn that despite being advised by planning officers early in this process that the plans as proposed to include housing would very likely not be successful because of their non-compliance with NPF4 and the local development plan. I think that's really disappointing, and that's something I wasn't aware of before today. And I also feel that perhaps more effort could have been done to consider diversification, a different type of diversification that might achieve the same outcome. And it may have been done, but it's not been presented before us today at all. The other point I would make, though, is that I'm also very aware of the housing demand locally, and I would argue that although there is adequate land throughout Perth and Kinross, the location of available land is hugely important. And I do know that there is a shortage of housing of particular types. You just need to talk to the constituents who live locally, particularly of social housing. And I also don't think that it would impact elsewhere, because the current housing that's been built in that area has been snapped up almost before it can be built and the plans can be developed. But fundamentally, this decision is about compliance with established planning regulations and policies regarding the use of our green belt. And for me, the use of the green belt and the retention of it is absolutely paramount. And so for that reason, I will be supporting I'll need to get this right, the amendment put forward by Councillor Massey, with some reluctance, I have to say. And perhaps I would, if I may, Provost, I would actually urge both parties, both our planning team and the applicants, to continue their dialogue to find a way to find a compliant diversification of the use of the land that will enable the golf club and the community asset to survive, but at the same time not breach our protection of the greenbelt areas that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Leader next.
Thank you, Provost. It's quite remarkable that today, this morning, this afternoon, Council has sat for over 3 hours discussing this. And it's been extremely an extremely healthy debate with strong views held on either sides, not on political lines purely at all, because it's not allowed to be, but it's personal views and it's personal experiences that are coming into play, and that's how it should be. From my perspective, what I want to say is that I have huge respect for the membership and the leadership of the golf club and the efforts that they have put into this. I also have immense respect for the corporate social responsibility of Kilmac and as a very strong house builder within the area and been involved in so many other projects. And it's testament to all of these people that they have themselves devoted so much time in preparation for today and in building up the case. However, for myself, it is about planning. It is about the green belt. It is about the importance of respecting the intention of all 40 councillors back in 2015 to 2017 to develop this policy. And we've heard loud and clear from officers today that were this application to be approved today, it would be a significant departure from the local development policy and could easily have consequences in terms of other applications coming forward, which would further undermine what has been agreed. So I hear the arguments on both sides, but I will be voting in support of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Barrett next.
Thank you, Provost. The key ground for refusal is that this is a greenbelt land protected under Local Development Plan 2 and National Planning Framework 4 and is outside the settlement boundary of Perth City, and the proposals don't meet any of the limited exceptions criteria. I'm very concerned about the significant impacts of flooding raised by this proposed development in my ward. Setting aside the questions about the adequacy of the arrangements in the plans to address the drainage and the surface water runoff, which Scottish Water have made clear cannot go into their struggling drainage systems, my key concerns about the low road access to the site. That isn't included in the applicant's flood risk assessment, but they've confirmed that it is the only accessible route into the site except for emergency vehicles in Woodside Crescent in time of flood. We've seen the map of expected flood events in Low Road in the slides shown to us by officers and in the applicant's own flood risk assessment, and I hope elected members have also seen the photos provided to us by Perth Community Flood Aid showing the effect of repeated flooding in Low Road over the last few years. We know that the climate is changing and that heavy rainfall and serious flood events are becoming more frequent. Residents in the Low Road area are very, very concerned regarding serious flood, traffic and access problems which will ensue if this development's given the go-ahead. I was in Low Road when the force of the water there could take you off your feet, and when the flooding of their homes was made worse by golf club members forging through the floodwaters at speed, causing a bow wave that increased the filthy water going into the Low Road homes. In wet weather, residents and users of this development, and I fear contractors too, will try and get in and out unless they get stuck. And the flooding at Low Road won't be improved by the Craigieburn flood scheme. The 22 properties that protects are in Queen's Avenue and Queen Street, not Low Road or Woodside Crescent. Also, the applicant's ecological impact assessment recognises the risk to irreplaceable ancient woodlands that we referred to earlier, and particularly important trees are identified in their tree strategy. As well as losing 1/3 of a hectare of native upland mixed ashwood, we also lose a wildlife habitat strip of connected woodland. At a time when we as a council have recognised that we face a biodiversity emergency and we're doing our best to support and create wildlife corridors, it's shocking to me to be considering granting an application which will destroy these precious resources. A Craigie Hill Golf Club member has pointed out to me that if the club are struggling and will want to redevelop the 18 holes to a 9-hole course, they could easily do that with some minor financial assistance and without the need to use up vast green areas with housing, etc. Like Councillor McCall, I'm not convinced that alternatives have been fully explored by the club, and I do hope they can do so. I'd like to thank everyone for the work that's gone into this application, and all the past and current members of the golf club and their public affairs company for their efforts to contact councillors. As a former golfer myself, I do have sympathy for their position, but as councillors, we know we can never make everyone happy with our decisions. As elected members know, as we work towards Local Development Plan 3, great care and thought goes into our local development plan to ensure we take a joined up approach to development, and we must stick to our policies and strategies. I urge you to please accept the recommendation in the report and refuse planning permission for this proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Next.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be frank, before this meeting today, I was not decided. In some ways I was conflicted. I think there was seemed to me strong arguments pro and con. But it is a quasi-judicial process. I have listened to the evidence, and to me it is clear, it is compelling to support Councillor Massey's amendment. It just seems to me, one, in terms of the figures, and I thought they were very helpful on housing supply, not just over the next 5, but next 10 years. And indeed, it may be I'm no longer on the housing committee, but it actually be quite useful for some of the figures quoted by Councillor Massey, if we could circulate that to, I think, all members, just setting out the number of units that we're looking to establish in the various sites. And for instance, Oudenarde was mentioned, this position in Crieff, and also kind of the timescale or possible timescale that will apply. There's also Scone North. I think the other point, it seems to me, is important is the danger that this does indeed undermine the planning process. And even 175 units, I think in terms of your overall balance and supply demand and the way in which house builders are looking to plan and project ahead, I think it is disruptive to that process. I think there's real dangers that this, if we were to agree to the application, that it would in fact establish a precedent. And I can think of other sites and also with golf courses throughout Perth and Kinross where there could be risks there. And also there is a strong argument about the green belt and to defend that. And it's important in terms of our overall environment in Perth and Kinross. So I support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Rebeck.
Thanks, Provost. I'm really contradicted here because I think a lot of what Councillor McEwen said about the immediate requirement for social and affordable housing in the city centre is right. And I also really like some of the plans for the community hub, and I can see the net gain for Perth. But the contradiction, of course, is that I am well aware of the angst that people who live with flooding every day of their lives feel, and it happens in Perth City North, but I also know residents of Low Road who've had that terrible thing of having their houses flooded, and I'm not sure the issue of flooding's been resolved with this discussion today. So I'm genuinely really contradicted here, and I feel slightly better actually by getting that off my chest now. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other members wishing to speak, in which case I shall come to Councillor Massey to sum up his amendment first of all.
Thank you, Provost. I have to say that I have a great deal of sympathy for the golf club. And as I said, I find myself in agreement with some of the points they have made. But this application does not conform with the Greenbelt policies of NPF 4 or LDP 2, and no argument has been put forward to depart from the development plan. So I ask fellow councillors to support my amendment.
Thank you. Bailey.
Thank you, Provost. Councillor Massey rightly highlighted earlier the housing emergency, and I'm glad he agrees that we're living through one. Housing emergency dictates that we need to build affordable housing today, not tomorrow. I'm convinced that these homes will be built as a matter of urgency because of the golf club's situation. Yes, it's out with the settlement boundary, but the M90 provides a sufficient barrier to limit further development within this axis. It was mentioned at the start that developing here affects the viability of other sites that are currently agricultural land, and the closest ones, i.e. those at Perth West, do not have a robust barrier against further creep over the decades as the M90 offers here. The reasons that my motion states for deviating from the plan still set a high bar for anyone else wishing to do so. The 20-minute neighbourhoods, both affordable and accessible houses, the safeguarding of a much-loved community asset. Granting this application provides affordable housing in Perth today, not the promise of some maybe coming on a farmer's field to the west one day in the future. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Bailey. Members, that now concludes the debate, and hopefully it has been helpful. We have had nearly 4 hours of questioning and debate at this point. Thank you very much to the deputies for their part in that as well. It's not easy coming along to speak before council, so it's appreciated. We will now move to the vote, and I'll hand over to Mr. Hendry to manage the vote.
Thank you, Provost. Members, we're dealing with item 5 on the agenda, report by Strategic Lead for Economy, Development and Planning. We have a motion by Bailey, seconded by Councillor Anderson, to approve the application. The terms of the motion were circulated to you in the chat and with the further addition following the last recess. We have an amendment by Councillor Massey, seconded by Councillor Grant Stewart, to approve the recommendations in the report and to refuse the application. So just to be clear to members, can I ask you now to indicate whether you're voting for the motion by Bailey to approve the application or the amendment by Councillor Massey to refuse the application? Councillor Allen.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson. Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Bailey Brock.
Amendment.
Councillor Carr.
Amendment.
Councillor Chan.
Motion.
Councillor Cuthbert.
Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Frampton.
Abstain.
Councillor Freshwater.
Amendment.
Councillor Harvey.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang.
Amendment.
Councillor McPherson.
Amendment.
Councillor Mayer.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Motion.
Bailey McLaren.
Amendment.
Deputy Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Colin Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Grant Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Watt.
Motion.
Councillor Waters, Councillor Welch, and Bailey Williamson. Provost, we have 9 votes for the motion, 26 votes for the amendment with 2 abstentions, so the amendment is carried.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, we're now going to break for lunch. We will resume at 2:15.
Time is it now?